Mr. Chairman, there are 13 ayes and 9 noes.
The motion to table
Mr. Chairman,
passes. Yes, who seeks recognition?
I seek to strike the last, move to strike the last word.
The ranking member is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, in this last amendment by Ms. Scanlon that was just ruled out of order, you ruled it out of order because it references a specific date. In my parliamentary universe, adding a specific date is considered a limiting amendment. It limits the scope of the underlying amendment. It does not expand it. Therefore, it cannot be a grounds for holding an amendment out of order because it limits it. It doesn't expand it. It's called in parliamentary terms a limiting amendment, which is always permitted. So this is just another example of the Republicans using obviously specious reasoning because you're afraid to vote on anything to do with January 6th. You're afraid to vote on all the things we've talked about before because your constituents might hold you responsible. So I would ask you why this is not a limiting amendment. Why this, in what way this expands the scope of the amendment, and I'll yield to you for the purpose.
I'll be happy to answer. We will belabor the point further. I've already explained this, that by presenting this amendment, it changes the purpose of the bill and makes it about January 6th. On its face, by your explanations, by all the comments that have been made, you want this to be about January 6th. You just said it again. You emphasize the same point. That's not what the underlying legislation is about.
Reclaiming my time.
You asked me to respond, and I'm giving you a response. Okay, so on its face, the amendment violates House Rule 16, Clause 7. Now, you can disagree with me, but you're not the chairman anymore. I'm sitting in the chair now.
Reclaiming my time. I certainly do disagree with you.
And I want to say to our witnesses, thank you for being here, for standing up and showing us your courage. I'd like to focus a couple of questions and ask Ms. Gaines to respond. You know, the evening that the attack on you happened, I mean, I think the whole country thought, how is this possible? You've had the courage to speak out on an issue that is very personal to you. I have 3 daughters, and to think about the issue that you're talking about and standing up for what you believe in, the freedom of speech, the First Amendment protects your ability to do that. And yet, San Francisco State University President Lynn Mahoney wrote a letter sympathizing those who attacked you. And I can't imagine how that has made you feel. I know how it's made me feel.
No, it's we've used the term domestic terrorists a lot in this hearing, and that's constantly something I get called by these same left-leaning protesters who, again, for simply saying women deserve fairness, we deserve safety, and we deserve privacy, and we deserve respect. And I get called a domestic terrorist all the time. So this term for me, maybe I have a skewed perception of what it means. But yes, it's been, I don't know, again, it's just disheartening to be in the position I'm in, feeling like I'm asking for the bare minimum, feeling like I'm asking for something that is so simple that we all are entitled to, yet I'm being, you know, held hostage. And there's one more piece I wanted to mention about this night that I haven't really touched on. I briefly touched on it in my testimony, but the verbiage outside the room, when I was still giving my speech, these protesters, the video doesn't do a good job showing of just how many were in these stairways. I mean, it was hundreds of people. But these people, they were outside the rooms, and one side of the hallway would yell, "Trans rights are under attack," and the other side would yell back, "What do? We fight back." And they kept using the term, "we fight back." And so after I'd finally been barricaded and I was in this room for a couple hours and they kept saying it, I'm like, why do they keep saying "we fight back"? And we've talked a lot about this stemming from the top in regards to Trump and January 6th and Tucker Carlson giving the license to people to basically do whatever they want but we're not talking about this on this side of it, because the day before this incident at San Francisco State, the Biden administration press secretary had a press release, a press conference where she says word for word, our trans community is resilient and they fight back. And I find it so ironic they were using the exact same verbiage, "we fight back." They kept saying it continuously. And so I wanted to put that on the record because we've talked about it a lot stemming from the top on the other side, but I think it's crucial to understand that goes both ways.
Well, Ms. Gaines, thank you for your courage. Thank you for standing up for what you believe in. Any sort of threats or violence or intimidation is despicable. It has no place in our society. And to my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, real courage lies in being able to stand up even when it's not popular, and even when you may not agree with it, but being able to stand up to a bully, and that's what this is. This is about a bully in our society for a narrative that some don't agree with, and it doesn't matter which side you stand on, but you have stood up to that bully, and I applaud you for doing that. And the country is watching you and your leadership, and we appreciate what you're doing. Mr. Chairman, thank you for holding this hearing and standing up to a bully. We should all condemn any violence that happens, and I think that that's exactly what this hearing is about, and I yield back.
Well done, Mr. Pfluger. The gentleman yields back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Yagan, yeah, am I saying your name right? Tell me, if you were king for a day and you could rewrite America's tax code, tell me the 3 changes you would make.
Number one, I would equalize labor and capital tax burdens at the top. There are a couple ways of doing that. The billionaire minimum income tax is one that would move in that direction. I won't rehash those details. Senator Johnson actually talked about a corporate tax integration type.
What's number 2?
Sure. Number 2, part of closing the labor and capital disparity is closing the Gingrich-Edwards loophole. And number 3 is ending abuse of trusts. So the estate tax has been eviscerated. Many of those, you take assets that you know are worth a lot. Right now, they're purportedly worth a little because you haven't taken your company public. You put them into a trust, it explodes.
Do you support a wealth tax? Do you know what I mean by wealth tax?
I do know what you mean by wealth tax. The billionaire minimum income tax taxes income, and that I think is the way forward in that space.
Well, let me be a little more precise. Do you think appreciation of assets that are not sold, unrealized gain, should be taxed?
I think you should have to prepay tax on it that will eventually be due at sale, gift, or bequest.
What do you mean prepay the tax?
Sure. So if I have $5 billion of unrealized capital gains, I have $5 billion of taxable income, and I'm currently paying $1.5 billion on that. So that's a 15% overall tax rate.
Well, let's don't complicate this. I want to understand
Sure.
what you're saying. Let's suppose an American owns a piece of real estate they inherited from their father or their mother. And it was, when they inherited it, they got to step up in basis. It's worth $100,000. And all of a sudden, the interstate came through. And the property is now worth $1 million if they sell it. But they don't plan to sell it. They're going to leave it to the kids. Do you think that Americans should have to pay tax on the unrealized gain, the increase in value?
In general, no. At that level of wealth, for example, housing.
You think only wealthy people should?
At the very top, it's hard to tax,
But let me be sure I understand what you're
Sure.
saying. All right, let's suppose that's not just an average American. Let's suppose that's an American. What do you define as rich?
In the minimum income tax, it's $100 million of wealth or more.
Okay, so you think if you're really wealthy, you should have to pay a tax on your unrealized gain?
I think you should have to partially prepay if you're liquid, if you have liquidity to pay.
Do you think somebody? Why can't you economists answer questions? Should any American have to pay tax on unrealized gain? Why can't you just answer me?
Yes, there are some who should.
Who?
The ultra wealthy who have liquidity should prepay some tax.
What
on
if they
that.
don't have liquidity?
They should not have to pay, and they will owe at sale, bequest, or gift
So if you have cash, you ought to have to pay, but if you don't have to pay?
to prepay. I have in my testimony, there are examples of how this works so that you can preserve incentives to build a new company, take it public.
Okay,
While
what do you
also-
think, Dr. McBride? Do you think we should start taxing unrealized gains? And what do you think that'll do to the economy?
Well, I have several concerns about the approach. The first of which is it's completely untested. It's never been tried in this country. We have more than 100 years of history with the income tax, and
Europe's tried it, haven't they?
no, they've tried wealth taxes.
Yeah.
Their experience
How'd that
with
turn
wealth
out?
taxes has
How did
been
that turn out?
bad. It
Why is
resulted
that?
in a lot of taxpayers exiting the country, for one thing, in France, for instance, other countries that have tried it. And you suddenly lose a big chunk of your tax base that you're trying to tax there. We have that option in this country as well. The result has been that most of those countries in Europe that have tried a wealth tax have rolled them back,
Yeah.
including France, because they were administratively challenging. The basic challenge is what you're describing, trying to value assets without real market transactions. So this is a valuation dispute. It means we get the IRS engaged in yet another challenge. They're currently doing this with the estate tax. Those estates that are subject to the estate tax, those
I
valuation
need to ask
episodes
one-
can
I
go
need to
years
ask
and
one
years and
more.
years.
Can I have 30 more seconds?
Proceed.
Dr. Is it Clausing? Clausing?
Yes.
Yeah. Why do you and Dr. Yagan, why do y'all want to punish wealthy people?
I think I can speak for both of us that we're not interested in punishing anyone. We're interested
Well,
in
you're
having
interested
a
in taxing
fiscal
the hell out of them
system.
more than anybody else.
I think
Why,
the
what makes you
reforms
think,
that
what
Professor
makes you think that making tax policy on the basis of class or status makes sense?
I think it's a very American phenomena that throughout the history of the income tax, we have valued progressivity, and our current income tax does that. We used to rely on things like tariffs to raise revenue. Tariffs are regressive consumption taxes that disproportionately hurt the poor. We believe in this country that those with the greater ability to pay should pay more of the burden. And that's part of what a healthy capitalism does. It enables people to gain from things like trade and technological change and business innovation, and to contribute a little more to the fiscal system when they're very successful in doing so. And I think that that's a very legitimate way to structure the tax system.
Can
And
I ask you a question?
Yes.
Why do you think so many wealthy people are leaving New York City?
New York City is, an incredible city of innovation, immigration, entrepreneurship.
Yeah, but why are so many wealthy people leaving?
I think there are big advantages to living near centers of entrepreneurial activity, and we see that on the west.
You think they're leaving to be nearer to centers of entrepreneurial activity, do you?
Well, I don't think there are a lot of people, fleeing New York City. That New York City has.
Sure they are. There are thousands. I mean, there have been study after study after study. Why are so many wealthy people leaving New York City?
I think there's an enormous number of wealthy people who are in New York City and continue.
But why
to
are
be
so
very-
many leaving?
I can't speak to why particular people.
I can
leave.
tell you
I
why.
know
It's
that-
taxes. You know that as well as I do. It's
I
taxes.
think if you look at the economic,
Some of it's crime, but most of it is taxes.
well,
People vote with their feet. The same reason that people are leaving California and moving to Austin.
If you look at California, it's one of the most successful economies in the world, and it continues to be so. It attracts people.
But they're
as
losing
well.
people.
I don't think it's in any danger of decline, nor is New York City. And these are very vibrant places.
I don't think we're going to
for
ever
fundamental
agree.
reasons. Yeah.
I don't think we're going to ever agree. But I appreciate the time of all three of you.
Thank you.
To be fair, there also are people moving the other way. There are people who move to New York. They just don't all leave from New York. It's a two-way street in and out of New York, and it's a two-way street between Austin and California. People leave Texas and go to California, and some of them do very well.
Well, that's true, Sheldon, but I can show you study after study after study, as you well know, and as the professor knows, that shows that people are leaving high-tax states and moving to low-tax states. All you have to do is
Well, they also leave.
all you have to do is look at the demographics. Pick the 9 states that have, say, a state income tax, and compare that, or that don't have a state income tax, and compare that to the states that do. It's called tax avoidance, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's perfectly legal.
People have different preferences. You know, if you look at where immigrants choose to live in the United States, they often go to those same places that you were talking about. You know, so I do think that, you know, there's movement in both directions.
Yeah, but here's my point. Here's what I think rational people do, and here's what I bet all 3 of you would do, and I bet Sheldon would do it because he's a smart guy. Okay, if he won the lottery tomorrow and won $10 million and paid his taxes and has $6 million left, he's going to at least consider, you are too, moving to Florida because
No, I
they don't have
wouldn't.
a state income tax.
For the record, no, I wouldn't. Never crossed my mind.
Well, most rational. Well, I don't mean you're irrational, Sheldon, you know that. But
It can be quite rational to not want to
But
live
when
in
you're
Florida right
liquid,
now.
when you're liquid, and you don't have to pay a 6% off the top versus 0%, it's a rational economic move, is it not?
I agree. It's rational. I mean, the thing about taxes that we're talking about is they're a cost or a price, and so claiming that this cost or price doesn't matter is essentially throwing out the very basic law of demand, the basic fundamental idea in economics. The prices matter. The costs matter.
See, this is what this always boils down to, and there's no way we'll ever agree. Okay. But at least 2 of you believe that government, all things being equal, can spend a dollar better than people can. And that's your this is America. You can believe that.
For the record, that's not in their testimony.
I just don't agree with you. I think people can spend the dollar better, all things being equal. And all you have to do, if you know the history of government, you know that I'm right. But I don't expect you to agree with me because you're professors. Okay? Thanks, Sheldon.
Always entertaining. Senator Kennedy, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. God bless you, everybody. God bless you. God bless you. And now God bless me because I'm going to take a couple of questions, okay? Where are we going to go with the questions? Do we have a mic at some point? Do we have a little mic? Oh, go ahead, please. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Girard. Thank you for the shout out earlier. I appreciate that. One of the issues we are super passionate about at the New Hampshire Federation of Republican Women is women's sports and keeping biological men out of women's sports and out of women's bathrooms.
Right.
We recently released a statement calling out Chris Pappas and Ann Custer for voting against the Protection of Women's and Girls Sports Act. So how do we ensure that women can compete on an even playing field and feel safe when it comes to this issue?
Vote for Trump. That's how you do it. Okay? You're going to have no problem. You got me on that one before it was even an issue. It's the craziest thing. And you know, it's amazing. It's a good statement and or question, but so many people, they hear it, they can't even believe it. They can't even believe what's going on with that subject. No, you vote for Trump. That's going to be totally gone. Okay? Go ahead, please. Yes, go ahead.
Yes, sir, Mr. President. Thank you very much, Frank Dawson, and thank you for the phone call 3 years ago.
I remember that, yeah.
Thank you very much. You are the man.
Thank you very much.
I would like to ask you a question concerning the military.
Okay.
Do you promise the veterans out there, guarantee them that you will make our military stronger as it was before you were pushed out of office, and you will return, and also make a promise to all law enforcement, all legitimate law enforcement, that you will protect and support them all the way?
So I remember the call. I don't know why, but I have a good memory. But I remember the call very much, and I appreciate the love with that statement, not just a statement. The answer is yes. We rebuilt our military. We have the finest equipment in the world. You know, we had jets that were 48 years old, where the grandfather was flying them. Some of the bombers, the grandfather was flying them, and now the grandson is flying them. Now, we're redoing our military. We redid a lot. As you remember, I made Space Force, and they tried to end it as soon as they came into office, and they had a revolt in the military. We created Space Force. That's the first time in 78 years since the Air Force that something like that's been done, creating a new branch. So the answer is yes, 100%. You will be satisfied. Not only that, the veterans are very satisfied, 92%. But now, in other words, we had an approval rating, the VA, of 92%. That's never happened before. That's a real job. You know, we got approved where you can fire sadists and sick people. You know, you couldn't fire them no matter what they did. You couldn't fire because of lots of reasons. I won't blame civil service. I won't blame unions. I won't blame anyone. You couldn't fire them. And we got that done. And we also got it done where you can go out and get your own doctor, and we pay, because some of the veterans, as you know, were online for weeks and months. Some of them became terminally ill, waiting to get just a very simple procedure or prescription. They'd have to wait 4, 5, 6, 7 weeks. And we made it, you understand this, those two things were very important. The ability, we fired, I think, 12,000 people. They were sadists. They wouldn't attack these people in prime time, I can tell you. But they were sadists, they were thieves, they had some very bad people. We got rid of them. We actually had that passed in the legislature. They've been trying to do it for 48 years. And then on the other, as you know, that was a big deal. If you have to wait online for any more than 24 hours, you have the right to go out and get a doctor, get yourself taken care of, and we pay the bill. And that worked out unbelievably well. You know that's true. That's why they liked us. But the answer is yes, we'll take care of it, okay? Thank you. Good to see you. Okay, please.
Good afternoon, Mr. President. I'm Christine Peters, also from the New Hampshire Federation of Republican Women.
Good.
And two of the top 3 issues that women are concerned about right now are inflation and the economy. And how do things like the environmental social governance play into all of the economic issues that are facing women?
Well, they do. And, you know, you have these fanatics, the environmental fanatics. I'm an environmentalist. A lot of you are very, you know, you want clean water. We want clean air. Nobody wants dirty air and water and other things. So, but you have to be reasonable. These people are crazy. They're putting windmills all over the place. They're going all over windmills. The birds are, you want to see a bird cemetery? Go under a windmill sometime. And they're made in China, just so you know, and causing a lot of problems, very expensive. But I will say this, we will take care of this inflation by going and drilling. You know the sign in they have Con Edison in New York, utility. They used to have a sign, dig we must, drill we must. We must drill. And we did some job. We had it down to below $1.87 for a period of time, gasoline. And what a difference that made. When they came in and they closed everything down, they got rid of ANWR. ANWR, since Ronald Reagan, they've been trying. Ronald Reagan couldn't do it. Bush couldn't do it. Nobody could do it. I got it done. The biggest site probably in the world, drilling in Alaska, they ended it the first day of the Biden administration. I mean, you think about it. They ended it the first day of the Biden administration, a site that would have been almost the size of Saudi Arabia, maybe bigger, and they ended it. But we'll do it again. We can do it again. We'll get it done again. When you reduce the price of energy, everything else is going to come down. And when everything else comes down, what we'll be able to do is get the interest rates down, and we're going to get our country back. Because our country, the way it's going right now, is going into a depression. We're going into a depression, like a 1929 type depression, and we're not going to let that happen. But we're going to drill, we're going to get energy down, everything else. When they held it back, the energy became so oppressive, so expensive, that everything went up, and you had inflation at a level that you hadn't seen in 52 years, and it's still horrible. But we're going to bring energy down, way down. We're going to get the interest rates down. We're going to get back to a great life. We're going to strengthen up our military. And we're going to be able to deal with China and Russia and everybody. And they're not going to play with us. They're not going to play with us. Thank you. Okay? Go ahead. Go ahead. Yes. Go ahead.
Is it on? Okay. God bless you, President
Thank you
Trump.
very much. God bless you.
My name's Christine. I'm from Atkinson, New Hampshire, and engaging with young voters is crucial. Here in New Hampshire, we have American First warriors like Caroline Levitt. How do you plan to engage with Gen Z voters?
Well, I think we're doing that, and I'll tell you what, you would be shocked, like Charlie Kirk and others, the job that they do with their youth. It's a youth movement. It really is. That's another movement. You would be shocked to see how popular we are on college campuses. Much different than what you read, much different than what you hear. But, you know, one of the things about having this horrible thing take place where 4 years of, we've lived in 4 years of hell in this country in many ways, in many, many ways, more ways than you even know. But one of the things is they have shown how bad they are. And we'll be able to do things now to get it straightened out. We have to make our cities safe again. We have to clean up our areas. We have to get things going in this country again. They've shown how... Okay, we'll do one more. How about one more? Go ahead. Now, this is a bad question, or if I don't give a great answer, I'll do another one. Because, you know, Elton John said, encores are very dangerous. You do a fantastic concert. Everyone's going crazy. Then you do an encore of a song, it's good. Then you do another encore, and the song doesn't work. And you leave. Everyone said, what a rotten job. But you're never going to say that about Trump, right? Let's go.
President Trump, my name is Brendan, and I would just like to know, what is your plan for dealing with the growing threat of North Korea?
North Korea has been a very good example of what intelligence is. I got along great with Kim Jong-un. We had a very tough start. I called him Little Rocket Man. I called him Rocket Man. I called him lots of things. He called us. And then one day I got a phone call, and they said, you know, we want to get together. And the Olympics in South Korea was coming up. Nobody bought it. They weren't selling anything. And all of a sudden, I got North Korea to participate in the Olympics, and the thing sold out like in 2 days. It was incredible. We did a great job with North Korea. We will be able to deal with North Korea. I don't think this administration will be able to deal with North Korea. Okay, one more. Go ahead, one more. Yes, ma'am.
President Trump, I believe most Americans can agree that the radical left's defund the police movement was destructive to our police force.
It's still going on, too, by the way.
Absolutely. When you are president, what will be done to correct the getting our police up to par with proper training, with proper numbers, and get them back on track?
So you're talking to the right person. We are taking care of our police. You know, when I was in office, we had billions of dollars worth of Army equipment, Marine equipment, naval equipment, billions in storage rooms all over the United States. And Obama didn't want to get it out because he said it looked too tough. It didn't look good to give it. I said immediately, get it out. I gave billions and billions of dollars. You know what I'm talking about. All of this ex-military equipment. It was incredible. And for safety, including trucks that were armor-plated, I gave it all to the police. We got it out. It was sitting there drawing dust. But very valuable stuff. We took care of our police. We are going to take care of our police, and we're going to make sure that we support our police, because our police can solve the problems of our cities instantaneously if you let them do their job. And we love our police, and we love our firemen and everybody else that does. But we have to support them, and we can't have them be afraid that if they use one wrong word, their life is ruined. We can't let that happen. And, you know, one other thing, they do an incredible job, and you have bad apples. Every once in a while, something happens. It shouldn't happen, and we have to understand things like that can happen. We have to support our police. These are great American patriots. They used to do a job. Now they're not allowed to do the job. We have to allow, especially in our cities that are rotting and decaying, we have to let our police back. We have to let them do the job that only they can do. They're fantastic people, and we are with them, and we're going to help fund them. We're not defunding. We're going to fund our police. Thank you. Great question. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you. This is an incredible place. This was a great day. I enjoyed it so much. I want to thank Steve and all of these incredible endorsers, because that's a record-setting endorse. But I want to thank you all. God bless you all. We'll be back. God bless you all. That's good.
The gentlelady from Georgia, Miss Green.
That was quite entertaining from someone that had a sexual relationship with a Chinese spy, and everyone knows it. But
I
thanks
move
for
to take her words down. Completely inappropriate.
Yeah, stand by just a second while we research the rule. Give me just a second.
I need to make sure I have my full 5 minutes.
A motion has been made. The gentleman will, the committee will suspend, and the gentleman will state the words that he wishes taken down.
Everything that the gentlelady from Georgia has said.
No, you need to be more specific.
The accusations of an affair with a Chinese spy, those are engaging in personalities, and those words should be taken down, and the gentlelady should not be able to speak anymore in this hearing.
That is not the latter part of that is not an appropriate motion, but we will evaluate the striking of those words. Give me just a second. The chair recognizes the gentlelady from Georgia and asks if she would like to retract those words.
No, I will not.
For those members who are wondering, we are looking into Clause 1 of Rule 17 and the Rules of the House. Okay, the chair rules that those words that were spoken are not going to be stricken from the record.
Mr. Chair.
The gentleman,
Mr. Chairman.
The gentleman from Mississippi is recognized.
I don't think there's any question about what the gentlelady said. I've been on this committee from day one. We've never had an accusation made of any member like that. And I'm appalled at it. We all ought to be embarrassed at it. We are a better committee than what the gentlelady is trying to make of this committee. So I appeal the ruling of the chair.
The ruling of the chair has been appealed. We will now, gentleman moves.
Mr. Chairman, a point of order.
Yep.
Right over here. Could you explain what part of those words are not engaging in personalities and what the basis of your ruling is?
No, we're going to let the vice chair take over the committee at this point. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I move to table the motion.
There's been a motion to table. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed say no.
No.
In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the motion to table is agreed to.
Mr. Chair,
The gentleman is recognized.
I request a recorded vote.
A recorded vote has been requested. Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Chairman, would the gentleman from New York, Mr. Goldman, yield?
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. McCall.
Aye.
Mr. McCall votes aye. Mr. Higgins. Mr. Guest. Mr. Bishop. Mr. Jimenez. Mr. Pfluger. Mr. Pfluger votes aye. Mr. Garbarino. Ms. Green. Aye. Ms. Green votes aye. Mr. Gonzalez. Aye. Mr. Gonzalez votes aye. Mr. LaLota. Aye. Mr. LaLota votes aye. Mr. Ezell.
Aye.
Mr. Ezell votes aye. Mr. D'Esposito. Ms. Lee.
Aye.
Ms. Lee votes aye. Mr. Luttrell. Mr. Strong. Mr. Burkeen.
Aye.
Mr. Burkeen votes aye. Mr. Crane.
Aye.
Mr. Crane votes aye. Mr. Thompson.
No.
Mr. Thompson votes no. Ms. Jackson Lee. Mr. Payne. Mr. Swalwell.
No.
Mr. Swalwell votes no. Mr. Correa. Mr. Carter.
No.
Mr. Carter votes no. Mr. Tanadar. Mr. Magaziner. Mr. Ivy.
No.
Mr. Ivy votes no. Mr. Goldman.
No.
Mr. Goldman votes no. Mr. Garcia.
No.
Mr. Garcia votes no. Mrs. Ramirez.
No.
Mrs. Ramirez votes no. Mr. Menendez.
No.
Mr. Menendez votes no. Ms. Clark.
No.
Ms. Clark votes no. Ms. Titus. Mr. Higgins. Mr. Guest. Mr. Bishop. Mr. Jimenez. Mr. Garbarino. Mr. D'Esposito. Mr. Luttrell. Mr. Luttrell votes aye. Mr. Strong. Ms. Jackson Lee. Mr. Payne. Mr. Correa. Mr. Tanadar. Mr. Magaziner. Ms. Titus.
Are there other members in the room who wish to have their vote recorded? Clerk, how am I recorded?
You are not recorded.
The chair votes aye.
Chairman Green votes aye.
The clerk will report the tally.
Mr. Chairman, on that vote, there were 11 yeas and 9 noes.
The ayes have it, and the motion is agreed to. The previous motion is tabled. The gentlelady from Georgia is recognized, and we will give her the time. The clock was stopped, and we'll give you an extra 10 or 15 seconds.
It is great to be here this morning. Thank you so much for joining us. It's good to be here with our Attorney General, Secretary Ward, President Hester, and so many of our great legislators from around the state. I have to say this past week has been pretty eye-opening. I, along with every Arkansan, have watched as the events unfolding in Israel. We have watched that in horror and sadness. The details are almost too terrible to describe, especially for someone like me who has had the privilege of visiting the Holy Land and building lifelong friendships with a number of Israelis. But one thing is clear: America's enemies are on the march. They are cunning, they are brutal, and they will stop at nothing to harm America and our allies. We know who our enemies are, not just Hamas and Hezbollah, but a regime in Iran that chants death to America, an authoritarian Russia, and a Chinese Communist Party whose stated goal is to defeat the United States at every turn. Yet for too long, in the name of tolerance, we've let these dangerous governments infiltrate our country. Arkansas will tolerate them no longer. Today, we are becoming the first state in the country to take an action like the one that we are announcing right now. At the beginning of my term, my administration worked with our partners in the legislature to get hostile foreign entities out of Arkansas. I was proud to sign Act 636, sponsored by Senator Johnson and Representative Vaught, banning foreign parties from 9 enemy countries from owning agricultural land in Arkansas. And today, we are acting on that law. I'm announcing that Syngenta, a Chinese state-owned agrochemical company, must give up its land holdings in Arkansas. Syngenta owns 160 acres in northeast Arkansas, which it uses primarily for seed research. The company that owns Syngenta, Chem China, is also on the Department of Defense's list of Chinese military companies posing a clear threat to our state. Seeds are technology. Chinese state-owned corporations filter that technology back to their homeland, stealing American research and telling our enemies how to target American farms. That is a clear threat to our national security and to our grape farmers, especially since the Chinese government enacted a law in 2017 requiring Chinese citizens abroad to collaborate with their country's security officials on intelligence work with no questions asked. This isn't about where you're from. We welcome Chinese Americans, Russian Americans, and anyone else who's given up foreign oppression for American freedom. This is about where your loyalties lie. We simply cannot trust those who pledge allegiance to a hostile foreign power. That's why I signed Act 525, sponsored by Representative McKenzie and Senator Boyd, to ban Chinese and Russian-made drones. And it's why I signed Act 758, sponsored by Representative McAlinden and Senator Stubblefield, banning public contracts with the CCP. We will make sure that every company operating in Arkansas is a friend to Arkansas and good to hardworking Arkansans. Secretary Ward has already notified Syngenta about this decision. If they refuse to sell, our Attorney General can move forward with legal proceedings and force them to get out of our state. Arkansas will always protect our farmers and our national security interest. I want to thank our legislature for passing this common sense measure, and I want to thank the Department of Agriculture for working so hard on this issue. I will now turn it over to Attorney General Griffin to address his team's next steps. Thank you all.
Thank you all. I want to provide a little context here. I can tell you that the idea that the Chinese government would care about non-military assets is exactly what they've demonstrated over the last few decades. In fact, we had congressional hearings in the late 90s in Washington on dual-use technologies, civilian-related technologies that the Chinese were obtaining from the United States. There is nothing that's off limits for them if they think that it will strengthen them strategically, whether it be related to engineering or the ability to feed their people, which is a challenge for them. We've had some instances and some federal prosecutions in this state that relate to seed technology. And so for those of you who think that this is some sort of outlier, you're wrong. I've been in the military for almost 30 years, and I can tell you one of the consistent themes of the last decade at least has been warnings about the communist Chinese, what they will do and what they are doing. So this is smart and this is strategic. So let me tell you what my role here today is. I've written a letter, which I'll be sending today, to Northrop King, Seed, and Syngenta, informing them that they have to divest themselves of the land that they have in Craighead County. And they have 2 years, as of about a month ago, a little over a month ago, to do that. If they don't do that, then we can take legal action. We have no reason to believe that they won't do that. Also, back in 2021, the legislature, with very, very forward-looking, I will say, for the legislature to pass a law that requires these companies owned by foreign entities to file and disclose. And in this particular case, the latest the disclosure, the ownership of this land could have been filed was June of last year. It was late. And so under that law, also I appreciate this, the AG can fine a civil penalty, can fine the company a civil penalty up to 25% maximum, doesn't have to be 25%, but up to 25% of the value of the property. The property in this case is $1.12 million, according to Syngenta's own federal filing. And so I am imposing the maximum fine of $280,000 on the company, and I am informing them of that in the letter as well. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Wes Ward from the Arkansas Department of Agriculture, and the governor and the attorney general have covered pretty thoroughly what's happening today. And so I just want to just take a quick moment to echo that and just the importance of Arkansas agriculture, our state's largest industry, and the connection to our national security. So certainly every event that we've had with the governor, with Governor Sanders, on a broad range of agricultural topics, she always starts at the beginning of every time that she has had an ag event, the connection between agriculture and our national security. So it is top of mind, obviously, for her, for us at the Department of Agriculture. So we certainly appreciate your leadership, Governor, the Attorney General, and to the members of the state legislature for your partnership and this important topic. So we'll just echo again the importance of agriculture here in the state of Arkansas, the connection to our national security. The case is pretty clear. We've done a thorough review, and we know that there are questions about foreign ownership of agricultural land throughout the United States. We're working actively to make sure that those questions are answered and that we continue to protect our state's largest industry as well as our security, both in Arkansas and across the country. And today, with the governor's help, we're sending a pretty strong message of how important that is and that what will be prohibited in the state of Arkansas. So thank you.
With that, we'll open up, take a couple questions.
This is probably more for General Griffin and for the Secretary of War. I guess, have you all identified other, at least agricultural land, that would face similar action? And kind of for make sure I understand the timeline of this, if they don't comply, something will be filed in court in 2 years?
Yeah, they have 2 years to divest themselves. I'm not going to talk about anything else that we know that we're not ready to make public.
Do they have a 2-year timeline for paying the fine as well?
I think they have 30 days to pay the fine.
And what happens then if they don't?
Well, we're looking at all of our options. If they are, well, we're looking at all of our options. We're not going to go to the extent actors are out of the country, it's hard to physically get access to them. But to the extent they have assets in the state, then we can take legal proceedings against that. So we will, I have full confidence that they're going to divest themselves of the property and they're going to pay the fine.
So I was wondering, how do you determine whether something is owned by the Chinese government versus something who's just a foreign national, and also the complexity of ownership, given that there may be multiple parties? So I'm just kind of wondering how you determine whether something is in violation of this.
It takes a lot of research. In this particular case, it's in their own filings. They say, hey, we own it.
I also think if you look at the parent company, they're very public about the partnership that they have, and so it's a very clear sense in this particular case.
Are there any other state actors, foreign countries that own land in Arkansas that you have concerns about?
We, like the Attorney General said, when we're ready to make public any other areas and people we're watching, but certainly we're always looking and we'll continue to monitor anything that we deem that could be a threat to our state's agriculture industry as well as our national security.
Yeah, I would say, I would say one more thing as it relates to China in particular. Because of the nature of China's government structure, SOEs, as they're called, state-owned enterprises, are a way of doing business. And so the idea that there's all these prosperous, large and growing Chinese companies that don't have ties to the Chinese government, direct ties, that's just not the case. Now, there are varying degrees of ties, but in this case, these are Chinese government owned.
Of course, I'm sure. No surprise about anybody here.
And both of them are going to do with lecturing and public records regarding it. You said before on the lecture that was purchased that it had features that explain the cost of it. Can you specify that or elaborate more on what those features are? And the second question I had was on the to-be reimbursement that was put on the original invoice by Governor Stafford. Who authorized Stafford to put that on there? Did you authorize that?
It went through standard protocol for our office on any purchase through the office manager and the team that was requesting the purchase to be made. In terms on specific features, the height of the podium is specific. I don't know if you've noticed, but women are traditionally a little bit shorter than most of our male counterparts, and so that makes a little bit of a difference, but it also incorporates sound components that make it easier to plug in for multiple media outlets at one time to get the best sound quality, I guess, possible for relaying back to TV and purposes of that nature, and a number of other things that I'll let come through in the audit process.
Is there a reason why you're not using it today?
Yeah, because I figure if I do, then you would talk about nothing else instead of the important actions that we're actually taking today, which unfortunately is not surprising that while we are focused on things that actually impact our state and impact Arkansans, the media wants to spend all of their time focused on things that frankly don't. Amen. Any other questions? Thank you guys, we appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome, Mr. Secretary.
Thank you, Senator.
Mr. Secretary, do you agree with the President that we should ban the private ownership of assault weapons in America?
Senator, I do.
What is an assault weapon?
It is, for example, an AK-47.
Can you give me a definition other than just pointing to a specific weapon? Would there be other weapons besides an AK-47 you would ban?
There very well are, and I remember when I was a federal prosecutor in the Central District of California from September 25th, 1989 to, I believe it was April 2001.
And I thank you for your service, but if you could answer my question.
The vast majority of law enforcement officers, leaders with whom I worked were greatly in support of the assault weapons ban.
Mr. Chairman, you know why we get so frustrated with you? Because you won't give straight answers.
I think I just did.
No, you didn't. No, you didn't. Do you have a definition of an assault weapon?
I am confident there is a technical definition of what is an assault weapon, and it was assuredly used in the context of the statute that previously existed banning assault weapons.
Mr. Secretary, our southern border is not secure, is it?
Senator, I have spoken about this. I believe I've addressed this earlier in the hearing.
Why don't you address it again?
Of course. Let me share with you a few things. Number one, when I speak of the security of the border, I am speaking of maximizing the resources we have to deliver the most effective results.
So
and let me assure you that we are doing
secure
so.
Because we're trying to secure it. Are we succeeding?
Senator, we are so focused on the security of our southern border. We are doing so much with respect to the surge of personnel.
How you're not succeeding?
Oh, Senator, let me share with you that the challenge of migration that we are experiencing at our southern border is not exclusive to the United States. It is something that is gripping the entire hemisphere.
But my job is to worry about the United States.
As is mine. As is mine.
And here's my question. Let me try to rephrase it. And I really do wish, I understand the position you're in, but you really should try to do a better job of answering the questions. Under the Biden administration, we have the most encounters. We have had the most encounters with people attempting to come into our country illegally in the history of ever. Under the Biden administration, we have had the most people entering our country illegally in the history of ever. Under the Biden administration, we have had the most gotaways at our southern border in the history of ever. Under the Biden administration, we have had the most number of people entering our country under a claim of asylum, having that claim turned down and still not being deported in the history of ever. And under the Biden administration, we've had the most fentanyl coming into our country in the history of ever. How can you possibly say the southern border is secure?
Do you know
I understand your answer that you're trying, but I'm not asking about your efforts. I'm asking about the results.
Well, let's talk about the results then, Senator. Do you know that last year we expelled and removed approximately 1.4 million people from the southern border? I believe that's the most ever. Do you realize that we are focused on enforcing our laws to achieve the security of the southern border?
I know you're focused, Mr. Chairman, or Mr. Secretary, but you're not succeeding.
Senator,
And when you come testify to us, you talk about how you're trying really hard. And I don't have any way to disprove that. I accept that statement in good faith. But the numbers belie that.
If I can, Senator, let me give you an example of a solution that we have delivered that for some reason is being contested. Because it's caused the 95...
I gave you 30 seconds, okay?
It's caused the 95...
Don't filibuster me. You've been doing that all day. I'm just trying to ask you
I'm just trying to communicate. It has led to approximately 95% drop in the number of encounters in between the ports of entry at our southern border of Cubans, Haitians, Nicaraguans, and Venezuelans
Mr. Secretary,
on January 5th.
Mr.
And why would that
Secretary.
be opposed when it is delivering precisely the result that you seek?
Did you just parachute in from another planet, Mr. Secretary? Because you're the only person in the Milky Way who believes that we're not having massive illegal immigration into America.
Senator, you're putting words into my mouth.
No, sir, I'm accurately describing the situation.
There is no question that we have a very serious challenge at our southern border.
Okay.
It is a challenge.
We can agree on that. Let me ask you another question. Why don't you just declare a new policy that other than children, if you present at the southern border, you claim refugee status, you claim political asylum, and you haven't claimed refugee status and political asylum at the first safe country, then you can't come in.
Senator, so first of all, when one presents at the border, it's an asylum claim, not a refugee.
But why don't you do that? Why don't you just
claim.
unilaterally declare that a safe third country policy? It would work. You can't come into America. If you're coming from Venezuela and you come through Mexico, if you didn't claim asylum in Mexico, you can't come here. You have to leave. Why don't you just do that?
Well, Senator, let me give you an example with respect to Mexico. A safe third country agreement, let's hypothetically assume...
You don't have to have an agreement with Mexico.
Yes, you do.
No, you don't.
I believe you do, Senator.
No, you don't. Other countries don't do it. Just adopt a policy that says, except for children, because you don't want to send children back by themselves. Just adopt a new policy that if you didn't seek asylum in the first safe third country, you can't come in, period.
Senator, are you aware of the notice of proposed rulemaking that we issued, the comment period of which closed yesterday?
You've had 2 years to adopt a policy like I just described. Why haven't you done it?
So, Senator, what we have done But
haven't you done that?
We have surged enforcement resources. We have
Why haven't
developed.
you just adopted? Please, if you would, Mr. Secretary, answer my question.
It is my understanding.
Why haven't you adopted unilaterally a safe third country policy that would stop, except for children, all the folks from the Northern Triangle countries, all the folks from Venezuela, all the folks from Cuba, all the folks from the Middle East from coming into our country? Why haven't you done that?
Senator, it's my understanding that those are two things. It is my understanding that those agreements do require
you don't have to have an agreement with anybody. It can be a policy established by the Department of Homeland Security.
Senator, I'd have to review the.
You haven't reviewed that? You haven't considered that possibility?
Let me finish, if I may.
Sure.
I would have to review the legal underpinnings of your assertion.
Well, you better get reviewing.
And I also
you ought to get reviewing. This is the first time that's occurred to you.
I also do not think that that is sound policy.
You don't think this is the first time that's occurred to you?
I also do not think that that is sound policy, that we should shut down our entire asylum system.
I didn't say shut down the entire asylum system. I said safe third country. All you have to do, Mr. Secretary, if you're really serious, and it's beginning, frankly, to appear that you're not, is adopt a policy that says we're not seeking anyone's agreement. We don't have to. If you're coming from another country and you come through, let's say, Mexico, and you say you're seeking asylum, you have to seek it in Mexico or the other first safe third country, or you can't come in. Period. Done. End of story. Why don't you do that?
Senator, I don't think that we have the unilateral authority.
Sure you do. Other countries do it.
Number one and number two, as I've mentioned.
Have you tried sneaking into China?
As I've mentioned, I do not think that is sound policy.
Why?
Because you are basically shutting down our asylum system.
No, you're not. You're saying we honor your right to seek political asylum. But you're cherry picking. Do it in Mexico first. Why haven't you done that?
I think I've addressed that issue, Senator.
You don't want to do it, Mr. Secretary. That's what it's beginning to look like. Because you think our borders ought to be open. And it would be more intellectually honest if you just say that.
That is false.
I don't agree with you. You have to watch up here what people do, not what they say, and everything else is just cottage cheese.
Senator, I don't think the
Chairman.
1.4 million people who were expelled or removed last year would consider the border open.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Secretary, you've had millions coming into the country illegally. The most of the history of ever under your watch. And everybody knows that, apparently, except you. Either that or you're not being forthcoming with
We've also had the largest number of individuals expelled or removed from the southern border. And if one takes a look at the apprehension and encounter numbers, and then the removal numbers, one would have a different view.
If you do the safe third country policy, that'll solve half of your problem right there.
Thank you,
and you're
Senator.
not denying anybody asylum.
Thank you, Senator Kennedy. Senator Ossoff?
Thank you, Mr.
And who would this be directed to? Would you like to come up?
If I could ask Mr. Walsh.
Okay. Mr. Walsh, if you would mind.
Matt, thank you for being here.
You're recognized.
Just a quick question for you. We've heard in the news last week and even today that it's pro-life to vote against this bill. We've heard that suicides are prevalent, and suicide has impacted my family, so I'm sensitive when I hear something like that. I've read some of the stuff that you've done, and I was wondering, can you speak to the statistics of mental health and suicidal tendencies for the people who have gone through transition and for people who have not? In your studies, from what I've read, can you speak to that?
Mr. Walsh, you're recognized.
Sure. Well, the claim that doing the chemical castration drugs or surgery or hormonal intervention, the claim that this prevents suicide or has positive psychological effects down the line is utterly, totally baseless. There are no credible long-term studies that bear that out. And one of the reasons for that is that there couldn't possibly be any credible long-term studies because we've never done this to kids on this scale ever before in history. So this current, shall we say, crop of children, they are the guinea pigs. This is all experimental. We're sort of trying it out on them to see if it works. Now, they have attempted a few times to do studies, and the interesting thing is that the World Professional Association of Transgender Health, WPATH, which is a radical far-left pro-trans organization, they commissioned a study to try to prove that that hormones and puberty blockers decrease suicide rates among trans-identified youth. And even in their own study, they found that they couldn't prove it. They couldn't make that link because it's just not possible to do. The other thing I would mention too is that, you know, the number of trans-identified youth has skyrocketed in recent years. We're talking about exponential 10x, 20x growth. Just huge numbers have increased. And what we hear from the pro-trans side is that, well, this is not a social contagion. It's just that, you know, there's always been this many trans people. It's just that they were not in an affirming environment before in history, and so they couldn't come out. And now, for the first time, trans people have the ability to live their truth, so to speak. Well, if that's the case, and there have always been these sort of like millions of trans people, and if it's also true that if we don't affirm them, that it would cause them to commit suicide, then we should be able to look back in history and find just this unbroken, incredible epidemic of children mysteriously killing themselves because they weren't being affirmed as trans. And what you find is that that didn't exist. I mean, the youth suicide rate has increased exponentially alongside trans affirmation. So trans affirmation causes the suicide rate, not the other way around. The last thing I'll note is that the suicide rate among trans-identified people is sky high. It remains sky high. All the data shows this. It remains sky high even after surgery. And in fact, in the most reliable data that we have, it's years after surgery when suicidality is the highest for trans-identified people. That's the reality.
Chairman Peston, you good? Okay. Any further questions for Mr. Walsh while we're out of session? Mr. Hammer? Representative Hammer?
Thank you. I found it, thank you, Mr. Walsh. I found it interesting. One of our people testified today that they had their gender affirming surgery at 16. And I know you in former comments mentioned this on your blog. At about 16, you're an adult who's mature and can make decisions. You're that at 16. I don't care what anybody says. Even going so far as to say, you know, 16 people, when you're 16, you should be married and could be pregnant or should be pregnant. So I'm curious if 16 is an adult in your view. Why does this bill have the minor defined as 18?
Mr. Walsh, you're recognized.
Yeah, that's a hit piece you took from Media Matters, from something when I was a radio host 13, 14 years ago, in my early 20s. It's also not an accurate reflection of what I actually said. I was talking about the fact that people tended to marry young historically, and that's all that was about. How does that relate to this subject?
Just curious of your definition of if you feel like people are adults at 16 should.
Well, people are adults at 18, but actually, your brain is not fully developed until you're 25. So we should be having a conversation about whether we should even be doing these surgeries to people at 18. But certainly before 18, it's absurd. I mean, do you think that a 16-year-old can meaningfully consent to having their body parts removed? Do you? No?
We do not. Yeah, we ask the questions. It's not. It's. Representative Hammer, you are recognized. No more questions. Okay. Representative Clemens, you are recognized.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you give us a summary of your educational background or your healthcare education experience?
Mr. Walsh, you're recognized.
My experience in healthcare?
Your educational background. I'm just curious. You've testified as to a lot of your own research. So I'm curious for what purpose you do that and what background you have to qualify you to speak to that.
Well, my background that qualifies me to speak to this is that I'm a human being with a brain and common sense, and I have a soul. And so, therefore, I think it's a really bad idea to chemically castrate children. That is my experience. Also, I did, now it's true, I didn't go to college, but I did go to school long enough to learn how to read, so I can read the data for myself, and that's exactly what I've done.
Representative Clemens, you're
And for what purpose do you conduct your research and use this brain of yours?
Mr. Walsh, you're recognized.
I use it for the purpose of trying to protect children from being castrated and mutilated. That's one of the things I try to do.
You don't use it to,
Clemens.
thank you, Mr. Chairman. You don't use it to get clicks on your
Let's state
publication?
Well, are you using it right now to try to get clicks with this interaction?
On
No, I really like the
Mr.
idea
Walsh.
of getting of drawing attention to the fact that this is happening to children. I know you seem to find it very amusing. I don't.
Representative Clemens.
Well, you made a lot of misrepresentations and characterizations in your comments, so I think it's fair for me to question your background.
What did I
And your
mischaracterize?
Let me finish, please.
You're recognized, Representative Clemens.
You know, if you're going to come before a committee and make mischaracterizations and misrepresentations, it's fair game for us to ask you your educational background and your foundational knowledge for making such characterizations. That's my point. So I'm curious about you speaking to the development of the human brain by the age of 25. I seem to recall you advocating on behalf of firearm possession at the age of 18. Do you think that's appropriate?
Let's stay on the bill, please.
That's all I got.
Okay.
Yeah, well, can I respond to that?
Representative Mitchell, you're recognized.
I can't respond to what.
Representative Mitchell is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, I think your original article, blog post, or tweet, or whatever, kind of started this firestorm. So I'm trying to figure out, where we need to look for these surgeries, because I'm still trying to find, the surgeries, because, the sponsor of the bill last week, I kind of agreed with him. I said, we need to split this bill into two parts. I may agree with him on the surgery part, because I don't think it's happening. So, you seem to have started this, so I need your evidence of where these surgeries are occurring in Tennessee. Could you give me, places, times, maybe some names, or something that,
Yeah.
you know of?
Mr. Walsh, you're recognized.
My evidence is the healthcare provider's own words. I outlined Vanderbilt Health and their transgender care program, and the people that work for that program, their own words, talking about what they do, and talking about, for example, providing the chemical castration drugs to adolescent children. As far as surgeries, double mastectomies do happen, and the way that I know that they happen is that after I called attention to this program at Vanderbilt, they said that they were going to stop performing, they were going to put a pause on the program that performs these surgeries on minors. And so if you're pausing the program that performs surgeries on minors, then I'm going to assume that the program existed. Otherwise, you couldn't have paused it. So now, the exact number of kids who are being subjected to this, I don't know exactly. It's really hard to come up with those numbers, I think, because the people doing it aren't really proud of it, and there's not a lot of interest on their end to tell us. But I do think that, even one child being horrifically mutilated is too many. So I know that it's more than one, and that's reason enough to put a stop to this, I would say.
Representative Mitchell, you're recognized.
Yeah. So last week I had an amendment that, we're looking to protect children from abuse. And I also had an amendment to stop cosmetic surgery of rhinoplasty and breast enhancements to minors. How would you feel about that?
Sure.
Is that mutilation of children as well under the age of 18? They can't think for themselves?
Representative Mitchell, that's not on the bill that we have.
Yeah, it is. It's surgical. It's surgical.
I'm happy to answer that.
You're free to answer, Mr. Walsh.
Okay. My personal feeling about banning breast enhancements for minors? Yes, I would be all for, personally, I'd be all for banning that, absolutely. Yeah.
Representative Mitchell.
Okay, and so I think the previous representative, proved that you have no medical background, correct?
No.
So you're here probably just as a public policy. You're trying to address good public policy, correct?
Mr. Walsh.
Yes.
So I'll just have to question, some of your public policy, expertise when, I'm reading here, Singapore is able to have nice things in part because they execute drug dealers by hanging and arrest even petty vandals and thieves and beat them with a cane until they bleed. We don't have nice things here because we aren't willing to do what is required to maintain them. So, with statements like that, I kind of have to question your public policy beliefs. And, and you also stated there'd been no studies. Well, I'm sitting here holding a study from the American Academy of Pediatrics, from the University of Pittsburgh, about the suicidal disparities between transgender and cisgender adults and children. So I think, before you state things, you may need to know all the facts. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Is that, can I respond?
Chairman Williams, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I make a motion to go back out of session, or back into session. Thank you.
Is there objection? All right.
We'll take a couple of quick questions, and then I'll shake a few hands. Question, ma'am, go ahead. Hello.
Hi, welcome, President Trump.
Thank you.
Okay, so you kind of already answered my question a little bit, but my question was, when you become president again, what would the first thing you'll do to fix our current school system and even our current military that's only focusing on teaching woke gender ideology over learning the basics of life and history and protecting us?
So, good question, though. Some of it partially answered, but not all. With the military, we're ending woke immediately. I ended woke, totally. And then in their first week, they reestablished it. It's crazy. They pay instructors hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. It literally, they want our military to be woke. And it's just not going to happen. You read in Hawaii where they had the horrible fire where they have people going there. And before they bring them on board, they have to study woke for a week. Can you believe this? In other words, everyone's wanting to get back to their home, finding the bodies. It was such a tragedy. You don't read about it too much anymore, but hell is going on over there. And they want to give them classes in essentially wokeness. Can you believe? So, you've seen it. Well, we'll end that very quickly. We will, with the school, I think the schools are very important. We're going to bring our education department back. Now, if you look at our education, we pay more per pupil than any country in the world by 3 times. And yet we're at the bottom of the list. We have a bad, very bad. If a place like Iowa, as an example, if you could run your own and we give you just a percentage of the money, because you wouldn't need nearly the money that they waste in Washington. Number one, you love your students, you want your students, you know your students. The parents will be involved. That's the other thing. We're going to let the parents, because some of these school boards have become tyrannical. They've been horrible. But we're going to bring that back, and that's going to answer your question, because I think that we can have one of the best school systems in the world. Right now we have one of the worst. They basically rate 40 countries, and we're always at close to the bottom of the list, sometimes the bottom of the list, and spending more money than anybody else. So we're going to take care of all of your needs very quickly, and I think it's going to happen very quickly. And one of the things we're doing, closing the border day one and starting drilling for oil. Okay? We're going to drill, baby, drill. Right? Okay, do you have one over here? Yes, please.
Welcome to Iowa, President Trump.
Thank you very much.
Here's my question. I felt that the 2020 election was fraudulent. So what measures are being taken by the RNC to make sure that that doesn't happen again?
Okay, well, you're not the only one, because if you look at polls, many, many people, big percentage of the country felt it was, they used COVID to cheat, but they would have cheated anyway. Many precautions, many law firms have been hired, a lot of work has been done, and beyond RNC, I mean, I wasn't very thrilled with them, obviously. I was always told you go out, you campaign. I left here early in the morning, and you go home, and you think you've done great. I actually made 7 rallies on the last day or two. 7. I don't know anybody's going to do 7 rallies, and they're big rallies, and they were full-scale rallies. And I left, and I said, we're going to win. And at 10 o'clock in the evening, I looked at the numbers, and it was over. We were doing so well. Pennsylvania, all these states were doing so well. Then all of a sudden, they made adjustments and all this crap, and it was a horrible thing. So They were able to do things with COVID. Oh, we can't go vote. We can't this. We can't that. Mail-in voting. We have a lot of great people involved. That's more than anything else. I say, I don't want help in getting the vote. I only want help. It used to be called election day. Now it's called election period because some of these things last for like 2 months, right? I said, that's all I want. I want people to work because we went back and we did great. And then the vote comes in and then it was looking great. And then all of a sudden, this horrible thing happened. And by the way, it's all down. People know it. We had judges that didn't want to get involved. They were afraid. Everybody was afraid. They were afraid of the subject. It's a disgrace. What happened to our country is a total disgrace, okay? Disgrace. So, and look at the result. I mean, look at the result. I mean, practically every problem that we talked about today wouldn't have happened. Ukraine wouldn't have happened. Inflation wouldn't have happened. I mean, so many of these things that we talk about today, we wouldn't even be thinking about. Look at the supply chain. Who ever heard of a supply chain where people can't deliver? You couldn't get baby food. You couldn't get anything. The only thing you could get is all the drugs you wanted. You could get drugs. You could get cocaine. I wonder whose cocaine that was, by the way, in the White House. What about that deal? Packages of cocaine. And they said, well, we don't know. No, we don't know. And then when they went for the fingerprint thing, you know, everybody's there, fingerprints all, it was wiped clean. Not one fingerprint. Not one fingerprint, which is impossible. You can go to any place in this room, there's fingerprints all over the place, especially those cubicles. So we're going to be working very hard. That's my number one thing, much more so than campaigning, actually, is that they don't cheat on the election, because they will try, and they'll be successful to an extent, but we're not going to let them steal this election, because this country is going to fail. I'll tell you, I don't think the people of this country will allow it to happen either, because this country is on a very thin edge right now. Thank you very much for the question. Thank you. Appreciate it.
I want to thank you, President, for all that you've done. And a question I want to ask you is, I'm telling you, no man can endure what you have endured. Do you realize that God is behind you and strengthening you? Do you realize that?
Well, I appreciate what you're saying. I understand what you're saying, too. It's been a terrible thing in so many ways. The only thing, the great gratitude I get, I'm looking at polls now where we're 50 points, 60 points up, you know, among all these people. And we're beating Biden in all these polls, and we're beating everybody. And we have had to endure. We endured a fake Russia thing for years. We endured all of this stuff, all fake. And think of how bad these people were. A guy like Adam Shifty Shifter, he's a real bad guy. I call him pencil neck. He's got the smallest neck I've ever seen. He's not going to be playing for your local teams, Iowa State. They're not going to be recruiting him to play football. But Adam Schiff, he makes up with Hillary and with the Democrats. They make up the Russia scam. He knows it's a scam. Think about how bad. I have sons and daughters. And, you know, we love our sons and daughters, right? And I watch him on television one day. So he knows it's a hoax. Russia. Turned out to be a total hoax. No collusion. There was no anything. So he knows it's a hoax right in the middle. And he goes out to the microphones after leaving a meeting, which is supposed to be very, quiet. Nobody's supposed to know what goes on in there. He goes out to the microphone and goes, the president's son, Donald Trump Jr., will go to prison for what he's done. Now, he knows it's a hoax. Think of it. It's not like I'm reading and seeing, and I watch this guy telling me. I'm watching him saying that my son is going to prison. My son is going to prison. And I know that he had nothing to do. There was nothing. The whole thing was made up. It was a made-up story. You know why it was made up? It was an excuse why Hillary lost. They said, let's blame Russia. And it was supposed to be a one-day deal, but the fake news wouldn't let it be one day. And the fake news carried it and on and on and on. We have the same thing right now. It's going on still. Do you know that if I got indicted, but because the people know me so well, they know it's all bullshit. It's all bullshit. They know that. And think of it. They say he questioned the election. He questioned. Well, everybody in this room questioned the election. The Democrats questioned 2016. They were all standing up. They were forming cards. They were forming all sorts of things. They were all, and those are the same guys that now that say it's so corrupt. Washington's a corrupt place. But think of it. You're watching some guy on television, a high-ranking congressman, say that your son is going to prison, and he knows that it was a hoax. I mean, how bad do you have to be to do that? And then it gets, no collusion after 2.5 years. And then 2 weeks go by, and I had a little piece. I focused on China and other things. It's almost the easy subject, right? I focused on the easy things like China, Russia. And then they start with Ukraine, Ukraine, Ukraine. He made a phone call to Ukraine. It was a perfect phone call. That phone call turned out to be absolutely, nobody's ever seen anything. Everything I said was right. About please study, if there's any corruption, please report it to the Attorney General of the United States. It turned out to be exactly right. A lot of people are saying right now they've got to undo even the theory of those indictments because those indictments were fake, just like everything else. So we have to get back to making our country great again. But you're right. Many people ask me that question. They say, how do you do it? And I do it because I feel real love and I feel real appreciation. And I do it because it's more important than anything else I could do. I could be living a very nice life in the most beautiful places all over the world. And here I am with you in Iowa, and I'd rather be here. I'd rather be here. So thank you very much. Very nice. Appreciate it. Yeah. Thank you.
Hello, Mr. President. My question for you is, what are you going to do to make future generations more successful than what we are right now?
Well, we have to save our country first. I really do. I mean, it's a great question in a way, but I think our country, we have almost 36 trillion in debt. We are probably, if this group keeps running, think of what's happened. We used to be allies with Saudi Arabia, a lot of money, a lot of everything, a lot of energy. We didn't need their energy. That was the beauty. But we were allies with all these different countries. Everyone's left us. Brazil is up with China now. Saudi Arabia is with China. Many of the Middle Eastern countries, a lot of oil, a lot of money, they're with China. We've lost the whole of South America is with China. This all happened over the last 2.5 years. It's unbelievable. We have no relation with all the money we waste on trying to bribe friendship. We try and bribe our friendships. We're not with anybody. We don't have anybody. And Europe honestly takes advantage of us on trade and on NATO. They take total advantage of us. And, you see that with Ukraine. We're trying to help them. And the problem is Biden got so far ahead of this thing that now, they're saying, well, why should we have to put up money? The stupid Americans are putting it all up. That's what happened. We're 200 billion and they're 25 billion. And it's right at their doorstep. And we have an ocean in between us. It's much different. So the first thing, just to answer your question, we have to save our country. Okay? It's a sad answer, but it happens to be true. Okay, how about we do one more? We always have to end on a good one, okay? We have to end on a very good one.
Hi, President Trump.
Hi.
First of all, I just want to say that I love and respect you so much, and I want to thank you for being America's biggest fighter. So there's that. But I also, let's have a policy-related question. I just want to know if you have any words of advice or encouragement for a lot of us young conservatives who are afraid to speak out, as you may know. I definitely know from being a student at Iowa, Hawkeye State, by the way.
Oh, good.
And I just want to know, especially with the caucus coming up, we need to get a lot more young people out there. So I'd just like to know if you have any thoughts on how we could be better patriots to get you
So
back
I'll tell
in
you,
there.
it's so great that you asked that, and with such enthusiasm and everything. It's so great. So remember this. There are far more of you than you think. You don't see them. You don't see them. I know people in Beverly Hills. I see them on television. We will stop Trump, but they go in and vote for me, It's true. It's like you think it's woke. It's not. You look at the percentage of votes and everything else, if you can count on them, which you basically can't. But look, you just keep your thoughts and because you happen to be doing the right thing. There are many, many more of you than you understand. There are many more of you than there are of them, and a lot of them are you, because it's common sense. They say, are you a conservative? Whether you're conservative, yeah, I'm conservative, but I'm really a person of common sense. We need a wall. We want low taxes. We want good education. We want to be able to build and buy houses. You know, nobody can buy houses anymore because the interest rates are so high. Remember when they were high? I was jawboning that guy. Get him down. You better get him down. They said you can't fire the head of the Federal Reserve, but he thought he was going to be fired. And, you know, you take a look at interest rates, what's happening right now. You just stay just the way you are. You shouldn't change at all. And just go out there. And people respect you, and they respect you more than you would ever think. And there's so many of you, okay? And you're going to a great school. Thank you all very much. So remember that. Get out and caucus and have a good time. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. There's a lot of people up there. So Elton John once told me, you know, when I do my last song and we knock it down, the place is going crazy, and then they start screaming, encore, encore, come back. And he'll come back, he'll do another good one, drive him. Then he comes back, and he hits a little bit of a dud. The people leave unhappy. It's very stupid to do a couple of questions, but let's give it a shot. Should we do that? Should we or not? Yes? Okay. Do we have a mic someplace? We'll take a few questions, ask whatever you want. But you know, it's, you know the story, right? Encores are always dangerous. Especially for singers, you want to know the truth. Go ahead, who's got the mic? Uncle Sam, you do. Good, let's go. What do you have, Uncle Sam? I like that man. I like the way he's dressed. He's a good-looking Uncle Sam. Go ahead. Go ahead. You have a mic? Yeah, go ahead. You could give it to anybody that has a question. Anybody has a question, go ahead. Ma'am, please. Go ahead.
As a member of Moms for Liberty,
yes,
parental rights and education are top priorities.
Yes.
Seems like schools have become indoctrination camps where they're focused on sexualizing our children, and it's just not right. How do we get back to the basics in the classroom, teaching, you know, reading, writing,
and arithmetic.
Right.
That's right.
And civics. Thank you, Mr. President.
You know, everything I said tonight, they could say he's conservative, he's got a wonderful conservative voice. Actually, it's a voice of common sense. And with education, almost in many ways easier than other things, we have to get back to common sense. And that is reading, writing, arithmetic. What they're teaching in schools today is insane. And most people understand it. Even the people that want it, they understand it. So we're going to do something. And a lot has to do with your governors and your people that are leading your states. And, you know, they're going to be given free rein to do what they want to do. You happen to have a great governor that's very much into it. And she's taken this state so far. And we'll have other governors doing the same thing. And it's a really great question. Thank you very much. Thank you. Yes, please, go ahead. Go ahead. That's interesting. Yeah, Trey Gowdy's very good. I think he's very good. We're going to have a lot of great choices for vice president. We're going to pick a great one, but we're going to have a lot of great choices. You know, this whole process is interesting. There are those that say they're all campaigning right now to be vice president. We've heard that a little bit, right? But I will tell you, we'll pick a great one. Thank you very much. Interesting. Okay, question over here. Go ahead, please. Yeah.
Mr. President, our farmers are under attack from increased fuel and fertilizers prices. At the same time, we're demonized by Washington and climate life leftists. How do we protect our farmers from the activist EPA and reduce the costs for our Iowa farmers?
So you were totally protected 2.5 years ago. Hard to believe it's 2.5. We have a year and a half to go. It seems so short now when you had to think in terms of much longer, but you were totally protected like never before. I think you would say, like never before. We will bring that back so fast your head will spin. A big thing is to get the fuel price down. Once that fuel price comes down, a lot of other things are going to happen, including the fertilizer, which I hear is a disaster for farmers right now. So we're going to take care of all of it, and it'll happen very, very fast, very, very quickly. Okay? Thank you. Thank you, ma'am. Okay, over
Mr.
here.
President?
Go ahead, over here, somebody.
Mr. President,
Yes.
I'm full of gratitude for everything you have done for us and are doing for us, for we the people. I'd just like to ask, thank you, sir. And what?
So far, I love this question. I'm getting ready for the kill. No, go ahead.
What can you do to bring back manufacturing jobs?
Well, I was doing that, and one of the things we were doing is making it very difficult to have auto plants in Michigan and all leave our country. We had almost nobody leaving during my administration. And one of the things you do is you have to tax some of these products that come back into this country because you have to make it competitive. I saved the dishwashing industry. I saved the washer dryer, the many industries because they were dumping product. It wasn't as good, but it was pretty good. And they were dumping product into the United States. I saved so many different manufacturers. If you look at Whirlpool in Ohio, they had such a problem. South Korea was dumping, and China, thousands and thousands, millions of units in at a price that is just, they weren't going to work. And I ended that. I put a 50% tariff on, and I was with them. That part of Ohio is thriving today. It's thriving, and those companies are doing great. So we have to look at individuals, but we will be able to handle that situation very easy. Don't forget, we have a power called the economy. We have a very powerful engine, and the problem is we have people that really don't know how to use it. They don't know how to use it to our collective advantage, but I know how to use it. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, question over here.
Thank you, President Trump. Under Biden, the president, we are seeing mobs of illegals coming across our border. Just this last week, we saw a violent mob try to force their way across the border near El Paso. What can we do to finally secure our southern border and finish the wall?
It'll be secured on day one, and then we have to make a decision. What do we do with the 15 million people that have invaded our country, okay? And we'll do the right thing, that I tell you. We will start by getting the bad ones out. And the sheriffs and law enforcement who we love, the sheriffs know every one of them that shouldn't be here. You know every one of them that shouldn't be here. And we'll take care of business. Go ahead. Thank you. Okay. Go ahead.
Mr. President, the mainstream media came after you and your family like crazy, but not one of them seems interested in investigating the Biden crime family or Hunter's laptop. They also censored anyone who asked questions in 2020. How do we get to the bottom of this?
So the mainstream media had a very high approval rating when I announced I was running for president. And just today I read where it reached an all-time low because people are wise to what's been happening. What they have done, they really are a political arm of the Democrat Party. It's a terrible thing. You saw last couple of weeks where the FBI and Twitter, it's called Twitter Files, where they work together. And they work together with Facebook. You couldn't say anything good about Trump, and you couldn't say anything bad about Biden. They had the laptop. They knew all about the laptop. They knew all these crimes are on the laptop, and they weren't allowed to do anything. They weren't allowed to talk. And frankly, they have that liberal inclination anyway. But even if they wanted to, they couldn't do it. I think we're making a lot of progress. I think that that Congress is doing a very good job now. We have some people. Nancy Pelosi is packing. She's gone. Getting her out that's a big step. And I think, Kevin, and all of the people in Congress, I tell you what, that whole, people thought it was a fiasco. I think it was a beautiful thing as it turned out. That 5 or 6 nights of voting and voting and voting and voting, I actually think that was like a cleansing action. It was a great thing that happened. And there's great unity in Congress. We do have to do something about Mitch McConnell. He's a disaster. He's a disaster. He gets his 10 guys and they give Biden whatever they want. There's something going on that doesn't make sense. They give him whatever they want. He gets his 10, 12 guys and they vote in order to give the passage because you need the 60 votes usually, and they vote and they give him what he wants. I just cannot understand. Nobody can understand it. We got to get him the hell out. He's a problem, big problem. In the meantime, I hope he's feeling well, but he's a big problem. Okay, go ahead. We'll take 1 or 2 more. Go ahead.
Hello, Mr. President.
Got to be a good one. If it's a good one, I'm out of here, right? If it's a bad one, I've got to take a couple of more to get over the stench of the bad one.
I just want to say it's an honor to hear you speak,
Thank
first
you.
of all.
But my question for you is, what can you do to combat transgender athletes taking over women's sports?
Well, you've done it here because your governor's passed legislation. You can't. No, it's crazy. It's like, how does people are seriously in favor of having it done, and I don't understand it. And I tell the story of that champion swimmer, and she's there, and she's looking up and down the line. She sees friends that she's been swimming with. She's a champion. And then she sees this person next to her, and he's a monster. He looks like Wilt Chamberlain, but a little bit different. She sees the guy has a wingspan. She's like looking up and down, and then she looks up, wow. And, he broke all these records, and it's just it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. You would almost say, and I said it once before tonight, but you would almost say it's people that want to hurt our country because it doesn't make sense. And that one's a very easy one to figure. Anyway, you've got it done in Iowa. A lot of other states are doing it. Some states are going the opposite direction, which is shocking. It's shocking. But we'll get it done throughout the country. It's going to happen. It's happening. It's just common sense. It's a great question, too. Okay. Yes, please.
See you. Mr. President, my grocery bills are going up every week. As someone on a fixed income, that really hurts, and it feels like Joe Biden doesn't even care about us in so-called flyover country. How are we going to fix these prices under control?
You said groceries, right?
Yes.
The groceries are horrible. I mean, you look at eggs and you look at bacon and you look at just what we used to consider staples, and you see the kind of numbers. A lot of it's going to have to do with energy. Once the energy comes down, a lot of other things are going to follow. Energy is so big, it's so powerful, it's so impactful, that once the energy comes down, you're going to see a lot of good things happen. And we have more energy than any other country in the world, more than Saudi Arabia, more than Russia. I call it liquid gold, and it's right under our feet. I mean, when you look at the craziness, we're allowed to go to Venezuela to take their energy, and it's horrible. It's tar. It's bad. It pollutes. You know where they refine it? In Houston. So they talk about the environment, but they bring it from Venezuela to Houston because that's the only place that has the refineries for this kind of very bad potential oil. And they refine it in Houston. So if you're a big believer in that, all that stuff is going up in our country. And it's just incredible. We have the greatest energy in the world. You know, I approved something, I was very proud of it, Anwar, Alaska. And Anwar is the biggest, probably the biggest site anywhere in the world, and probably bigger than Saudi Arabia, just that one, in Alaska. And Reagan tried to do it, he couldn't get it done. Bush tried to do it, he couldn't get it done, of course. And other people couldn't get it done, nobody could get it done. I got it done. And the first day in office, they terminated Anwar. And this would have been incredible to have for our country. I mean, literally, we were going to become energy dominant. We would have made, because it's a big, big industry, we would have made so much money that we would have started paying off debt, lowering taxes still further. We would have done something that nobody's ever seen before because we have so much. You know, I filled up the Strategic National Reserves. I knew not much about it. I said, what are the reserves that we want to fill up and that's been taken for years and years down to a low level? And I made a great deal. I got very little credit for it. I bought, when our oil price hit like these crazy low numbers, that's when I asked a question, because we had so much. I said, what about filling in the caverns? These are these massive, as in Louisiana and various other salt, like the salt mines. They're big, massive salt mines. And I bought 75 million barrels for peanuts and filled it very close up to the top. We were going to be topping it out. And then Biden, just before the election, in order to keep prices a little low, he released all of that. And now we set a record low. They've taken all of it and then some. And we have the lowest that they've ever seen it right now. It's the lowest that they've ever seen, meaning the reserves themselves. We had it filled up almost to the top, would have been topped out at really low prices. And by the way, now they have to pay 3 to 4 times more than what I was paying. And the Democrats fought me all the way. They got us stopped, actually, for a while. They fought me all the way at a price that was 25% of what they have to pay right now. So it's a crazy thing. And a lot of times we'll say common sense, but the other side either doesn't have common sense, or they really hate us. And let's take one more. I'm looking at that big, powerful guy there. I don't know who's a better looking guy. Let me see. I don't know. He looks good. They look good.
You look fantastic, and we love you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I appreciate it. I appreciate it. Thank you.
You're the greatest executive I've ever observed in my lifetime, and I think you've made it possible for governors, including Kim Reynolds, whom I love and respect for many years, to become the really high-level executives by your example. Now, you have passed legislation, or got legislation passed for like the wall. It got paid for, it was passed, you signed it. And then there was the XL Keystone Pipeline. All of these things have to do with interstate commerce.
Right.
There are Section 1, or Article 1, Section 8 in the Constitution. Biden had no authority in law to reverse those things. And what would you do to see to that never happens again under your watch, through your actions and with the legislation?
Well, the Keystone's great. I love your question. I like your statement even more than your question, to be honest with you. This could be the last question of the night because I love it. Appreciate it. Appreciate the job you do also. Do you know each other? Sheriff, do you know each other? Do you know who that is, that man? Huh?
I know Bobby.
Yeah, I love this guy. I love them both. Ready? So I think what has to happen, and it's very simple. The Keystone Pipeline was a tragic mistake that they made. That was so much coming from other parts, and it was going right into the source. Everything would have been so great. And by the way, environmentally much safer. The wall, I built hundreds of miles of wall, but I ended up getting, I want to use a nice word because we have such young people here, but the word that would normally be used would be screwed. But I wouldn't use that word because I don't want to get in trouble with the parents of these two beautiful young boys. No, what they did is they took advantage of the American public, and we built hundreds of miles, but there was other areas that we could have built. I ended up having to take it out of the military because I considered it an invasion, and the Army Corps of Engineers did a fantastic job. We built hundreds of miles of it, but I didn't get it the old-fashioned way, like getting it approved, because the Democrats fought us every inch. We had 11 lawsuits. It took us 2.5 years. We won all of them. But we had 11 lawsuits to win. They tried to fight the wall. But the bottom line is, it sort of shows, that's a good example. If you want to get something done, if you love our country, and you really want, if it's so important, you're going to get it done. You're going to find a way to get it done. This was sort of ingenious. We passed this big military budget, but we couldn't get a wall built for a tiny fraction of that. And I said, this is an invasion of our country. And it is, by the way. This is an invasion of our country, what's coming across our border. It's no different than soldiers. And they're bringing a lot of different problems than soldiers would bring. They're not bringing merely bullets, and they're bringing plenty of them. But they're causing tremendous problem for our country. And it's a problem that we may have a very, very long, unless we do something quickly, and we have to do it smart, and we have to work with law enforcement to do it properly. Not going to be easy, but they're hurting our country. They're killing the blood, the life stream of our country, and we're going to do something about it. But why they killed the Keystone, I have no idea. And the union, representing all of those thousands of workers, 48,000 workers, the union endorsed Biden. But all the workers are for Trump, okay? But the head guy endorsed Biden. And what did Biden do? Probably the second or third day in office, he terminated the Keystone Pipeline. So, so the people in that union are not too happy. They're not too happy. But look, bottom line is we have to use common sense, and we have to do a little bit like Kim, or a lot like Kim, and some other governors. Kim, you would be the first to admit we have some great governors, Republican governors, perhaps some Democrats too, but they don't seem to have our policies at all. You look at any Democrat-run state, and it's just not the same. It doesn't work. You look at these cities, our great cities are, New York City is a crime den. Chicago is a crime den. You look at these great cities, Los Angeles, San Francisco, you look at what's happening to our country. We cannot let it happen any longer. And one of the other things I'll do, because, you're supposed to not be involved in that. You just have to be asked by the governor or the mayor to come in. The next time I'm not waiting. One of the things I did was let them run it, and we're going to show how bad a job they do. Well, we did that. We don't have to wait any longer. We got to get crime out of our cities. Thank you very much for a good question. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Kim, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Matt Taibbi, a respected reporter who published much of the Twitter files, said, quote, Twitter's contact with FBI was constant and pervasive, as if it were a subsidiary. Now, I want to better understand why he would suggest that. Mr. Roth, while at Twitter, how many meetings did you have with the FBI?
I couldn't say for sure, but I would
More
say
than 10?
That's a
More
reasonable
than 20?
estimate. I couldn't say for sure.
More than 50?
That seems a bit high.
Many meetings with the FBI. Well, we know how many FBI agents worked at Twitter while you were there?
I don't believe any active FBI
Former
agents.
FBI agents. How many worked there while you were there?
I'm aware of perhaps 2.
Well, we know of at least 9 because they started the BU group chat, BU for Bureau. Now, Mr. Roth, did the FBI ever ask you to share information like users' communication data without going through proper legal channels?
No, they did not, and I would have refused if they had.
That's correct. I see that you denied Agent Chan's request for access to Twitter's data feed. What's sick isn't that you would deny it, it's that the FBI would even ask you for the private data of American citizens without going through legal channels of the law. Now, I want to remind you, Mr. Roth, that you are under oath. Did the FBI ever ask you to do anything that was illegal or questionably legal?
I'm not a lawyer, but certainly not to the best of my recollection or knowledge.
Now, from the hearing that I've been a part of today, it's almost impossible to tell where the FBI ends and where Twitter begins. We have Mr. Baker here, a former FBI agent, and there seems to be a revolving door between the FBI and Twitter itself. Even Mr. Baker said that there was no collusion with the federal government and Twitter. But Mr. Baker, that's you. You are the collusion between the federal government and the FBI. And now with it, this is such a problem because we're seeing censorship all over. Mr. Roth, Ms. Gaddy, did either of you approve the shadow banning of my account at Lauren Boebert? Yes or no?
No, I did not.
Not to the best of my recollection.
Well, let me refresh your memory, because on March 12th, 2021, and Mr. Roth, I know you looked at it because Fascist Twitter 1.0 had a public interest exceptions policy, which means for members of Congress to be shadow banned, it had to go before you, Mr. Roth. So I'll ask again, did you shadow ban my account, yes or no?
Again, not to the best of my recollection.
So the answer is, Mr. Roth, yes, you did. I found out last night from Twitter staff that you suppressed my account for this tweet. It's a freaking joke about Hillary Clinton being angry that she couldn't rig her election. It's a joke, but in response, being the sinister overlords that you all are, you placed a 90-day account filter so I could not be found. And now we see here that Twitter staff said the visibility filter on my account excluded me from top searches, prevented notifications for non-followers, and much more. This is considered an aggressive visibility filter. You silenced members of Congress from communicating with their constituents. You silenced me from communicating with the American people over a freaking joke. Now, who the hell do you think that you are? Election interference? Yeah, I would say that that was taking place because of you four sitting here. The Hunter Biden laptop story was suppressed. A sitting member of Congress was suppressed. A sitting president was banned from Twitter. You know, I bet that Putin is sitting in the Kremlin wishing he had as much election interference as you four here today. We've heard about threats to democracy. Well, what about shutting down a duly elected member of Congress? This is fundamental to our nation's governance, and you all attacked that very foundation. 230 protections? Well, those are for publishers, not for editors. And it's clear you were not acting as publishers, you were acting as editors. And Mr. Chairman, I think it's far past time that we remove 230 protections for big tech platforms who are abusing this protection. And let me just say, I'm not angry for myself. I'm not angry because I was silenced. I can reach out to Elon and to his staff, and I can see what's happened. And I can sit here today and hold you all in account. I am angry for the millions of Americans who were silenced because of your decisions, because of your actions, because of your collusion with the federal government. They can't reach out to Elon. They can't sit here today and hold you into account. We don't know where the FBI ends and Twitter begins. Free speech and even Twitter. Mr. Chairman, I yield.
The lady yields. Went over 24 seconds. I'll give Ms. Porter 24 extra seconds.
As a reminder, please remember that all speakers must sign up to speak, and speakers cannot yield or transfer their time to another speaker. Thank you. Our next speaker is William Kelly. Mayor Lightfoot, you and I may have gotten off on the wrong foot. Reporter, WilliamJKelly.com. I'm a veteran reporter in the city of Chicago, Emmy Award-winning TV host, radio, print journalism. I should be sitting over there with my colleagues, but I'm standing over here because on a weekly basis I was going viral asking you obvious questions. And instead of answering them, you told me that crime was down, my videos went viral, millions of views, comments, likes, and shares, and it was hurting your re-election campaign. So you revoked my media credential. That should never happen in a free country. And I'm asking the City Council to take the media credential process away from the next mayor of Chicago and the next superintendent of police, and put it in the hands of the Constitution. What you've done to the city of Chicago, I feel like this is more of a victim impact statement than an actual public comment. What you've done to me is nothing compared to what you've done to my city, the city of Chicago, the city that I was born and raised in, the city that I love with all my heart. You became mayor. The people of Chicago elected you. You shut down our schools, you shut down the churches, you shut down the businesses. You did the one thing that I thought could never happen. As somebody who was born and raised on the south side of Chicago, I never thought in my life that I would ever see the city of Chicago brought down so low as you have managed to bring it down. Shame on you. That is a legacy that you are going to have to carry. Future historians are going to have a hard time understanding how you ever even became mayor of the city of Chicago. I intend to write that book. I intend to make sure that at least there is some possible way for the city of Chicago to move forward. I hope that you realize what damage you have done to the city. I hope that after today's city council meeting, you will pack your suitcase and get the hell out of my city. Mr. Kelly, you are a pandemic. You are a pandemic. Thank you. Thank you, Mr.
My name is Emma Jo Morris, politics editor at Breitbart. I'm here today because I published a series of news stories 3 years ago in October of 2020 about Hunter Biden's now infamous laptop, also known as the laptop from hell, which is seen as some of the most scandalous reporting of the last decade. What was more scandalous than the reporting itself, though, was the fact that it exposed the unholy alliance between the intelligence community, social media platforms, and legacy media outlets. At the time, I was deputy politics editor at the New York Post, and my reporting showed that despite then candidates Joe Biden's repeated and furious denials, he was apparently involved in the foreign business deals of his family. Over several days, just weeks before Americans would vote for their next president, I revealed verified, authentic emails from the Biden Scion's hard drive showing Ukrainian business partners receiving leaks from the Obama White House. I documented an off-the-books meeting between then Vice President Biden and a Ukrainian energy executive and introduced the world to the big guy who got action on a deal with CEFC, China Energy Company. The Post published exactly how the material for the reporting was obtained, even identifying our sources, as well as a federal subpoena showing the FBI was in possession of the material the story was based on and had been since December of 2019. But when the stories appeared on social media that morning, the venue where millions of Americans go to find their news and editors to get their angles, within hours the reporting was censored on all major platforms on the basis of being called hacked or Russian disinformation. Twitter refused to allow users to share the link to the stories, banned the links from being shared in private messages, a policy, by the way, that's used to clamp down on child porn, and locked the Post out of its verified account. Facebook said it would curb distribution and reach of the links on its platform. However, the stories were not based on hacked materials, nor were they Russian disinformation, and despite those claims appearing to come out of thin air at the time, we would eventually learn that they actually didn't come out of thin air at all. On October 19th, 5 days after the Post began publishing, Politico ran a story headlined, "Hunter Biden's story is Russian disinfo, dozens of former intel officials say." God, I can't even say that with a straight face, you know? Politico printed a letter completely uncritically from veteran members of the U.S. intelligence community, falsely claiming that the Post expose has, quote, all the classic earmarks of a Russian information operation. My God. Most notable among the signatories of that letter were Jim Clapper from former DNI, Michael Hayden, former CIA, John Brennan, former CIA, despite having such damaged credibility following their participation in the Russia collusion conspiracy theory. A few days later, on October 22nd, when Biden appeared in the second presidential debate and was confronted with the facts of the Post's reporting, he said to Trump, quote, 50 former national intelligence professionals said this, what he's accusing me of is a Russian plot. But it was not, and he knew that. Now, fast forward to this year, 3 years later. Just last spring, House investigators revealed it was a call by now Secretary of State Antony Blinken to former acting CIA Director Michael Morell that prompted the spy letter published by Politico, which bypassed agency approval processes that would have been normally applied. It is also now known that ahead of my reporting, federal agencies were priming social media companies to execute an operation to discredit it. According to internal documents released by Elon Musk upon his acquisition of Twitter, the FBI and other intelligence community members essentially directed the platform's censorship operation, in part externally by working with top management, and in part internally by social media companies hiring eye-popping numbers of agency alumni. Journalist Michael Schallenberger reported, based on documents he obtained from Musk, that during all of 2020, the FBI and other law enforcement agencies repeatedly primed Twitter executives to dismiss reports of Hunter Biden's laptop as a Russian hack and leak operation. Feds arranged for top secret security clearances to be granted to Twitter management and even had encrypted messaging networks set up, which they dubbed a virtual war room. To this day, hundreds of people from the intelligence community work at social media companies. Over the last few years, my reporting has been confirmed by virtually every mainstream news outlet, from the Washington Post to the New York Times to Politico, when the stakes were nothing, by the way, 2 years later. No one denies that the laptop is real, that the origin story is exactly what I told you it was in the first place. This elaborate censorship conspiracy wasn't because the information being reported on was false. It was because it was true, and it was a threat to the power centers in this country. What this relationship between the US government officials and American corporations represent is an unprecedented push to undermine the First Amendment, the right to think, write, read, say whatever we want. And how we respond will determine whether we see a free press as inalienable or as optional. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Morris. Mr. Sauer, you are recognized for 5 minutes.
But at this point, recognize Senator Cruz.
Good morning, Secretary Mayorkas.
Good morning.
Is there a crisis at our southern border?
Senator, there is a very significant...
That's a yes or no question.
There's a very significant...
Is there a crisis?
Senator, there's a very significant challenge.
I think your microphone is not on.
There is a very significant challenge that we are facing.
Yes or no,
at the
is
southern
there a
border.
crisis?
I believe I've addressed that question.
So you're refusing to answer?
Senator, there is a very significant challenge, and
will you
are
answer if there's a crisis?
Therefore, we are dedicating the resources.
Okay, so you're refusing to answer. Well, Secretary Mayorkas, I'll tell you someone who is willing to answer, which is your and President Biden's chief of the Border Patrol in a sworn deposition in July of 2022 when asked, would you agree, Chief Ortiz, that the southern border is currently in crisis? Answer, yes. Notice none of those wiggle words, none of that equivocation. One word, one syllable, yes. Are you willing to speak with the same clarity as Chief Ortiz? Is there a crisis at our southern border, yes or no?
Senator, I'm very proud to work alongside.
So you refuse to answer. Let me ask you the next question. Has the crisis at our southern border made Americans less safe, yes or no?
Senator, we are dedicated to the safety
Has the crisis made Americans less safe? I don't want a discourse. It's a yes or no question.
Senator, we have a challenge of
You refuse to answer the question. Mr. Secretary, let me show you how someone doing his job answers a question in a straightforward manner. Chief Ortiz, is the crisis that is currently ongoing at the southern border making the border less safe for Americans and aliens alike? Answer, yes. One word, one syllable, 3 letters. That's how someone answers a question and does their job. You're being a politician misleading the American people. Let me give you a chance again. Will you show the same integrity Chief Ortiz shows? Is the crisis at the southern border making Americans less safe? Yes or no?
Senator, we have 260,000.
You refuse to answer the question. Let's move on.
And security of the
Next question, Mr. Mayorkas. Has the crisis made aliens less safe? Yes or no?
Senator, we are seeking.
So you won't answer that question either. It's a yes or no. Has it made aliens less safe?
Senator, smugglers are exploiting.
Has the crisis made aliens, less safe? Are you willing to answer it?
Senator, the smuggling organizations.
Okay, you're filibustering again. Let me ask you this question. How many migrants have died under President Biden?
Senator, your phrasing of the question is actually quite misleading.
How many migrants died in 2022?
Approaching our southern border?
Yes.
Precisely why we are seeking to exclude the smuggling
do you know the answer? Do you know how many died?
I do not.
You do not. Of course you don't. I know how many died. 853.
That is
853. And by the way, here are the numbers that have died every year. You go back to 1998, you see it's consistently between 300 and 400, 300, 400, 300, 400. Suddenly, 2021, what happens? You get in office, and that red line are dead bodies. I've been on the Rio Grande, and I've seen dead bodies floating there who've drowned because of your refusal to do your job. You don't even know how many have died. What do you say to the Texas farmers and ranchers who find pregnant ladies dead on their property, who find toddlers dead on their property? What do you say to them?
I say that is why precisely we are taking it to the smuggling organizations.
But you are not. That is simply not true.
Number 2, it is
let me read from the Wall Street Journal. The Wall Street Journal 2 weeks ago ran an article entitled, "It's like a graveyard. Record numbers of migrants are dying at the border." The story begins with this chilling line, quote, Eagle Pass, Texas. Local officials keep a refrigerated truck to hold the bodies of migrants who drown in the currents of the Rio Grande while trying to cross the border into the U.S. Mr. Chairman, I ask unanimous consent that this article be entered into the record. Let me ask you a different question. How many children have been sexually assaulted by human traffickers under the Biden administration?
Senator, this is precisely why we instituted.
I don't want a lecture. It's a question. How many children have been sexually assaulted by human traffickers under your administration?
Senator, this is exactly why on January 5th we announced
the parole program. Do you know how many children have been sexually assaulted?
This is why we.
Okay, you're going to refuse to answer that question as well. Let's move on. It's obvious you've been instructed to stonewall, so I'm not going to let you. You don't get to stonewall and filibuster. Now, one of my Democratic colleagues before said the Democrat talking point, quote, this problem didn't start under Biden. Look, I get if you're a partisan spinner, you got to figure out something to say about the absolute catastrophe that has played out under the Biden administration. True or false, Secretary Mayorkas, 2020 was the lowest rate of illegal immigration in 45 years. Is that true or false?
It is certainly the lowest level of immigration in many, many years. And what was it
in
2020? What was it, Senator, in 2020 that impacted the entire world, including the United States?
Okay, so your testimony is the reason we had the lowest rate was COVID. It had nothing to do with building the wall, nothing to do with ending catch and release, nothing to do with Remain in Mexico. With all respect, Mr. Secretary, that answer is laughable. And in fact, if you look at illegal immigration, let's look at CBP encounters. You can see 500,000, 500,000, it drops to the lowest level, and boom, what happens? You show up. And that red line is you. That red line is Joe Biden. And you're claiming nothing happened. Oh gosh, this was here before us. No, you made the decision to allow this to happen. Let me ask you, we now have over 5.5 million people who've entered this country illegally under Joe Biden. How many murderers have you released into America?
Senator, I'm not aware of any murderer whom we've
So you don't know?
Senator, let me say something.
Do you know?
If you take a look at...
No, you don't get to give a speech. Do you know how many murderers you've released?
I'm just trying to answer your question,
How many rapists
Senator.
have you released?
Senator, I'm trying
Do you
to
know?
answer your question.
You can answer, I know or I don't know.
Senator, any individual who poses a public safety threat...
How many child
is
molesters have you
detained
released?
and removed into the United States, from the United States.
Oh, so your testimony under oath, subject to perjury, is that you have not released any murderers, rapists, or child molesters among the 5.5 million? Is that your testimony?
Mr. Chairman, may I have the opportunity
No,
to
you may not. You may answer my question.
You're not
Is
allowing
that your testimony, yes or no?
Senator, you're not allowing me to answer your question.
I am allowing you to answer. I'm not allowing you to filibuster.
If you take a look at the pace of immigration in 2018 to 2019...
You're refusing to answer. Let's move on. Let's move on to gotaways. Gotaways are the people that get away that you know about. Now, what happened under your administration? Gotaways consistently down at this low line. Boom, you get in. And they go from below 180,000 to 600,000. Now, I'll tell you this about a gotaway. You don't know among those 600,000 a year, you have no idea how many are murderers, correct?
That is precisely why the
Correct?
number of gotaways...
Do you know how many of those are murderers?
That is precisely
So you
why...
refuse to answer the question. You know how many are rapists? Do you know how many are rapists? This is a question. You're a lawyer. You know how to answer questions. Of the 600,000, do you know how many of them were rapists?
Senator, this is why we
So again,
are...
the answer is no. Let me ask you this. Do you know how many of them are terrorists? And I don't want to, Senator, here's my lecture on this. Do you know how many of the 600,000 gotaways were terrorists? Yes or no?
Senator, we are focused on the
You
safety
refuse
and
to answer
security.
that as well. What's the result of massive gotaways? Well, one of the results is drug overdoses. And we now have, last year, over 100,000 overdoses who died, the majority from Chinese fentanyl streaming across the border. Now, you told Senator Cornyn you care, but look what has happened under your policy. When you open up the border to the worst illegal immigration in our nation's history, people die. You claim you care. Mr. Secretary, that is a lie. You know, some months ago, Karine Jean-Pierre stood up at a White House briefing and said, people are not just walking across the border. Was she telling the truth?
Senator, you are...
Was she telling the
so
truth?
profoundly disrespecting...
Was she telling
my
the truth?
22 years
Okay,
of government service.
you get to answer questions. You don't
Senator,
get to give speeches.
Senator, I served as a federal prosecutor.
All right, you're
for 12
refusing
years.
to answer. If you look at, she was lying, and she was not lying on her own. She was lying on behalf of the President of the United States. Now, the photograph of people walking. She was lying on behalf of the President of the United States. This is a photograph from just one day along the Rio Grande of hundreds of thousands of people walking across the border. You have allowed this to happen. The photograph that was before, what are these wristbands?
I don't know what they are.
You
Senator.
don't know what they are. Mr. Secretary, you have just testified to the American people you're incompetent at your job, because I've been to the southern border, and if you go to the southern border, along the southern border, you see thousands of these wristbands because the illegal immigrants wear them. The drug cartels, every color corresponds to how many thousands of dollars they owe the cartels. You have turned these cartels into multi-billion-dollar criminal organizations, and these are modern-day leg irons because these are children being sold into sex slavery, and you don't even know what they are. That is astonishing. Mr. Secretary, how many children have been sold into sex slavery under your administration?
Senator, we are kicking it to the cartels.
How many children have been sold into sex slavery? Do you know how many children have been sold into sex slavery?
To an unprecedented degree.
Mr. Secretary, I want to say to you right now, your behavior is disgraceful, and the deaths, the children assaulted, the children raped, they are at your feet, and if you had integrity, you would resign. And I will tell you, the men and women of the Border Patrol, they've never had a political leader undermine them. They despise you, Mr. Secretary, because you're willing to let children be raped to follow political orders. This is a crisis, it's a disgrace, and you won't even admit this human tragedy is a crisis.
Claiming 1 minute chairman time, Mr. Secretary, would you like to respond to any of those questions?
What the senator said was revolting. I'm not going to address it.
Your refusal to do your job is revolting.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, maybe we could put 5 minutes on the clock then, not 10.
Could we put 5 on the clock and we'll start it running?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I want to put aside my written statement for a moment and address one of the points that was brought up, I think an important point by the ranking member, that this body ought to be concerning itself with issues that impact directly the American people. The rising price of groceries, 76% over the past 2 years for basic foodstuff, the war in Ukraine, the inflation issues, the border issues, many, many other issues that concern us all as a nation. We can't do that without the First Amendment, without debate. When I gave my speech, my announcement speech in Boston 2 months ago, YouTube, I talked about all those issues. I focused on grocery. I focused on the fact that working class people can no longer afford to live in this country. I talked about inflation, all the issues that deeply concern you, and that you've devoted your career to alleviating those issues. 5 minutes into my speech, when I was talking about Paul Revere, YouTube deplatformed me. I didn't talk about vaccines in that speech. I didn't talk about anything that was a verboten subject. I just was talking about my campaign and things, the conversation that we ought to be having with each other as Americans. But I was shut down, and that is why the First Amendment's important. Debate, congenial, respectful debate is the fertilizer, it's the water, it's the sunlight for our democracy. We need to be talking to each other. Now, this is a letter that many of you signed, many of my fellow Democrats. I've spent my life in this party. I've devoted my life to the values of this party. This 102 people signed this. This itself is evidence of the problem that this hearing was convened to address. This is an attempt to censor a censorship hearing. The charges in this, and by the way, censorship is antithetical to our party. It was appalling to my father, to my uncle, to FDR, to Harry Truman, to Thomas Jefferson, as the chairman referred to. It is the basis for democracy. It sets us apart from all of the previous forms of government. We need to be able to talk, and the First Amendment was not written for easy speech. It was written for the speech that nobody likes you for. And I was censored not just by the Democratic administration, I was censored by the Trump administration. I was the first person censored by as the chairman pointed out, by the Biden administration 2 days after it came into office. Anti-Semitism, racism, these are the most appalling, disgusting pejoratives, and they're applied to me to silence me because people don't want me to have that conversation about the war, about groceries, about inflation, about the war on the middle class in this country that we need to be having. And by the way, I want to say this while I'm on the record, that in my entire life, and why I'm under oath, in my entire life, I have never uttered a phrase that was either racist or anti-Semitic. I have spent my life fighting my professional career, fighting for Israel, for the protection of Israel. I have a better record on Israel than anybody in this chamber today. I'm the only person who has publicly objected to the $2 billion payout that the Biden administration is now making to Iran, which is a genocidal program. I'm the only one who's objected to that. I've fought more ferociously for Israel than anybody. But I am being censored here through this target, through smears, through misinterpretations of what I've said, through lies, through association, which is a tactic that we all thought we had been discredited and dispensed with after the Army McCarthy hearings in the 1950s. But those same weapons are now being deployed against me to silence me. I know many of the people who wrote this letter. I don't believe there's a single person who signed this letter who believes I'm anti-Semitic. I do not believe that. There is no evidence of that. Now, I want to say something I think that's more important, and it goes directly to what you talked about, ranking member, which is the need, this toxic polarization that is destroying our country today. And how do we deal with that? This kind of division is more dangerous for our country than any time since the American Civil War. And how do we deal with that? How are we going to, every Democrat on this committee believes that we need to end that polarization. Do you think you can do that by censoring people? I'm telling you, you cannot. That only aggravates and amplifies the problem. We need to start being kind to each other. We need to start being respectful to each other. We need to start restoring the comedy to this chamber and to the rest of America, but it has to start here. My uncle, Edward Kennedy, has more legislation with his name on it than any senator in United States history. Why is that? Because he was able to reach across the aisle, because he didn't deal in insults, because he didn't try to censor people. He brought home people who were antithetical to what he believed in. He came home almost every weekend with people like Orrin Hatch to our house at the compound in Hyannisport. At that time, Orrin Hatch to me was like Darth Vader, because I was an environmentalist. And I was saying, why is Teddy bringing this guy home? But he knew that he was effective because he understood that comedy and respect and kindness and compassion and empathy for other people is the way that the only way to restore the function in this chamber. But more importantly, today we need to give an example in the leadership of our country of being respectful to each other. If you think I said something that's anti-Semitic, let's talk about the details. I'm telling you all the things that I'm accused of right now by you. And in this letter are distortions, they're misrepresentations. I didn't say those things. There's fragments that I said, but I denounce anybody who uses the words that I have said to imply something that is negative about people who are Jewish. I never said those things. And I want to point out also that the chairman pointed to Dennis Kucinich, who's fighting behind me. There is no two people in the country who feel more differently about American politics than these two people, and yet they were friends. Dennis attended his children's basketball games, attended his daughter's wedding. This is what we need, how we need to start treating each other in this country. We have to stop trying to destroy each other, to marginalize, to vilify, to gaslight each other. We have to find that place inside of ourselves of light, of empathy, of compassion, and above all, we need to elevate the Constitution of the United States, which was written for hard times. And that has to be the premier compass for all of our activities. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
For statutory changes, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Ossoff. Senator Cruz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, every day when I'm home in Texas, I hear from Texans who are deeply dismayed about the growing politicization and weaponization of the Department of Justice and the FBI. If you are not, every one of you should be deeply concerned about the damage being done to the integrity of the institutions in which you operate. My office hears regularly from FBI agents and from assistant U.S. attorneys who are likewise concerned about the politicization and weaponization of the Department of Justice and the FBI, and this is profoundly damaging to the rule of law in our nation. Last month, a whistleblower brought to light the existence in the FBI of a report, an FD 1023, in which the informant alleges that President Biden and his family members engaged in a $5 million bribery scheme during his time as vice president. Deputy Director Abate, is it true that the FBI has a report making those allegations?
I'm not going to comment on that, Senator.
And why is that?
I'm just not going to comment on information we received, investigations, or
Do you owe an
ongoing matters.
obligation to the American people to be candid about evidence of corruption by the President of the United States?
This is an area that I'm not going to get into with you, Senator.
Well, I understand you don't want to, and that's why people are mad at the FBI, because you're stonewalling and covering up serious allegations of evidence of corruption from the president. Yesterday, Senator Chuck Grassley stood on the Senate floor and alleged that there are 17 recordings of this informant from Burisma, Ukrainian natural gas company. 15 of them are recordings, voice recordings of him talking to Hunter Biden. 2 of them are voice recordings of him talking to Joe Biden. Deputy Director Abate, does the FBI have 17 voice recordings laying out evidence of a bribery scheme?
Senator, I would add also that we've worked with the House Oversight Committee.
Yeah, this is the Senate. We're the other side of the Capitol. This is the Senate. Do you have those 17 recordings?
I'm not going to comment on any investigative matters, Senator.
See, that's the problem. The FBI, and I've had this conversation with Chris Wray too, this is why you are damaging the institution. The American people have a right to know whether there is serious, credible evidence that the President of the United States took a $5 million bribe. And by the way, if it's false, Chairman Durbin just rolled his eyes. If Chairman Durbin were interested in the rule of law, we would have a hearing on these allegations. But of course, the Democrats don't want a hearing on these allegations. And to be clear, if the allegations are false, you know who could disprove them? Joe Biden. He could call for this to be released publicly. But the FBI is stonewalling. Would you agree?
Two things, Senator. No
Sure.
one's stonewalling. The 1023
You just said you refused to answer the
was provided
question.
in response to a subpoena.
Okay,
to the
then why'd
House
you refuse
Oversight
to answer my
Committee.
question?
The pertinent information is there, and I reject your assertion that the
Why
FBI
did you
is
refuse to answer my
politicized.
question?
I just answered your question.
Okay, so yes, you have a 1023. Do you have the 17 recordings, yes or no?
I'm not going to get further into that.
So you're stonewalling. You can't say I'm not refusing to answer your question, but I won't answer your question.
I'm going to answer within the parameters that we operate in.
That's the problem. The FBI has right now an unlimited hubris that you believe you are unaccountable. You don't believe you're accountable to the United States Congress, and you don't believe you're accountable to the American people. and you are doing damage. The FBI is a great institution. When I go home to Texas, people ask me, should we abolish the FBI? Now, I tell them no, because you have heroes and patriots working for you that are catching child predators, that are catching terrorists. But you're sitting there happily erecting a wall to protect Joe Biden. Will you provide to this committee, not the House, the Senate Judiciary Committee, will you provide the FD 1023 and will you provide the 17 recordings so we can assess what is the evidence, the specific credible evidence that Joe Biden personally took a $5 million bribe from a foreign national?
Senator, we will work with this committee, you and other members, to provide the information within the parameters of the process.
Will you provide the FD 1023, yes or no?
I will take that back and we will work with our
So
team.
you're not answering that. Will you provide the 17 recordings?
We will take that back and we'll work with you.
So you're not answering that either. Did you investigate in any way, shape, or form these allegations?
Senator, once again, I'm not going to comment.
So
on
you're not going to say
investigative.
whether you did your job?
We do our job to the very best of our ability.
Well, not here. You're not answering a single question to the American people. And you may think this is esoteric. I promise you, millions of Americans are concerned. You know who isn't concerned? Not a single Senate Democrat. We're going to go through this whole hearing. Not one Democrat will ask a question about this. You know who else isn't concerned? The corporate media, who is joining with the Democrats in covering up this evidence. If Joe Biden is innocent, the evidence should be made public and demonstrate that he's innocent. But if he is not, is it true this informant who alleged that he personally took a bribe was an informant the FBI had relied upon previously in other investigations? Yes or no?
Senator, in each and every investigation that we have, all the work that we do,
I asked you
the
a yes or no
expectation
question.
is that every logical avenue of investigation be pursued
I asked you a
to
yes
its
or no
fullest.
question. Are you going to answer it?
Yeah, I'm answering your question.
Was the informant one you had relied on previously in other investigations? Yes or no?
Senator, we run down every piece of information, every
You're not
lead,
answering it then. You're refusing to answer
objectively,
it. So you're refusing to answer the
to
question.
the fullest extent possible,
You're refusing to answer the
relentlessly,
question. Is that correct?
aggressively in all instances.
Senator, your
It's
time is
disgraceful. It's disgraceful, Deputy Director Abate. Disgraceful.
Senator, your time has expired. Senator Tills?
Chairman, I think Senator Blackburn goes before me, or Senator Welch. I appreciate the opportunity, but
Thank you, Senator Tillis. It's Senator Welsh is next. Senator Kennedy?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks to all of our witnesses here today. Ms. Robinson, I want to follow up by trying to understand your answer to one of Senator Cruz's questions. And this is really a question, not a suggestion. Do I understand your position to be that there are two sexes, but there can be more than two genders?
I wouldn't even say two, and we've got Dr. Lopez here as well, but there's also the definition of intersex. I think that often in these conversations we're conflating sex and gender, and I do want to affirm here that trans women are women. That is their gender.
Okay, but I'm trying to understand. Do you make a distinction between sex and gender?
Yes, sir.
Okay, explain that. Just. Do you think there are more than two sexes?
I believe that there's a definition for intersex as well that I want to acknowledge. But sex is assigned
so
at birth.
I'm just trying to understand. I'm thoroughly confused. So you're born, I'm talking about biology, male, female, and what else?
I believe that intersex is also acknowledged, but again, I'm not a doctor here. What I can
And
say
what does intersex mean?
is that there's a difference between sex and gender, and I think in these conversations we're conflating the two.
Well, but I want to start with sex. Okay, there's male, there's female. When a baby's born, before the baby has had time to even have a sense of self, there's male, female, and intersex. There's a third.
I believe that is true, but I would defer to Dr. Lopez as I'm not a physician.
Okay. And how many genders are there?
I think the gender is expansive, and the definitions are always growing. Today I can tell you, I
More
talk
than
to young
five?
people
More
that
than-
talk about non-binary as
More than 5?
I think the gender is not a binary, is what I'm trying
But
to say.
are there more than 5 genders? I'm just trying to understand. Are there more than 5 genders?
Well, I think that there was a time where women wearing pants didn't feel like it was appropriate for their gender, and yet I'm wearing pants today. I think that there are ways that we express our
gender
gender that
than
are
5
expansive.
genders? Are there more than 5?
I wouldn't subject myself to naming how many genders there are, but what I can say is
there
that
an
gender is a
infinite number?
reflection. Excuse me?
There's an infinite number of genders?
I think depending on your culture, there are a lot of different genders that exist. And I can also say that it's a term that's evolving. If you look at young people today, they really don't lean into the binary of only woman and man. So I think that it's incumbent upon us not to legislate on this, but create space for them to explore what their identities are, what their gender identities are.
Let's get back to athletics. I think I understand what you're saying. There are 3 sexes: male, female, and intersex.
I believe that to be true, but again, I'm not a physician.
And
so
there are an infinite number of genders because gender is a mental state.
Gender is about expression, and I think that there are a variety of ways that you can express your gender.
Okay, so there's infinite number. All right, let's go back to the biology. Male, female, boy, girl. Okay, biologically, do males have an advantage over females biologically in sports?
Again, I'm not a physician, and I can't speak to that.
What's your real world experience?
It depends. I mean, there are some people who are born male that I'm faster than if I were to sprint against them, and some that I'm not. Some males that are taller than some women, and some that are shorter.
You don't believe that a biological male has a physical advantage in sports over a biological female?
Not as a definitive statement.
Give me an example. Well, no, I don't think. How many female members of the NBA do you see?
Well, I can say that, there's been this news article about men that think that they could beat Serena Williams in tennis, right? That they think that they could actually score a point on her. And it's just not the case. She is stronger than that.
What's your experience, Ben? Male, female?
Both Serena and Venus lost to the 203rd ranked male tennis player, which they're phenoms for women. My experience, my husband, he swam at University of Kentucky as well. In terms of accolades and in terms of national ranking, I was a much better swimmer than him. He could kick my butt any day of the week without trying.
Okay. I just think, Ms. Robinson, I'm trying to understand where you're coming from. I think you lose a lot of credibility when you don't concede that a biological male has physical advantages over a biological female. I mean, I just think that's a proven fact, and you really hurt your credibility. I understand you want the world to be a better place. I do too, and I don't think people ought to be discriminated against because of an immutable characteristic. I don't. And I think that I think everybody ought to be free to be themselves. And what you do in your bedroom or what I do in my bedroom with a consenting adult is nobody's business. But if what I do in my bedroom with a consenting adult, if I decide I want to tell somebody's child about it, then other people have rights too. And I think parents have rights. And I think biological females have rights to be able to compete fairly in sport, in sports. So I really think you hurt your credibility when you refuse to acknowledge that biological males have an advantage over biological females. It kind of makes me wonder about all your testimony. Thank you,
Senator
Mr. Chairman.
Kennedy. I'm sorry, go ahead.
What I'm trying to say is that there is not a definitive advantage in all cases. Sir, I don't know if you believe that you could beat Serena Williams in tennis, but I probably think that that's not the case. There are not all cases where all men are physically superior to all women. And at the end of the day, in this conversation, we're not talking about that. We're talking about trans women who are, in fact, women, who deserve to play in a gender that matches their sports, who deserve all the benefits that Ms. Gaines is talking about. And as a cisgender Black woman, I can say definitively that my womanhood is not threatened by a transgender person asserting hers as well.
Senator Hirono.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thank all of the persons who are testifying today. For Ms. Robinson, do you know what...
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Hawley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Abadi, let me just stay with you. You just started to answer Senator Blackburn's question that not releasing the 1023 or talking about it as a matter of life and death, question of life and death, you said. Explain.
It is potentially a question of life and death.
For whom?
With regard to the source of the information.
So, okay, so now we've confirmed that the document exists. That's progress because the FBI director initially denied that it exists. Why did he do that?
We have already and previously acknowledged the existence of the documents.
Yeah, after you first denied it. Now, when a member of this committee read it, right, the FBI director, let's just get the record straight. The FBI director initially said it doesn't exist. Then Senator Grassley said, I've read it. Then he said, oh, okay, well, gotcha. I guess it does exist. Now you're going back and forth with members of this committee what's in it. Why don't you just release it? Is it classified?
The document is not classified.
Okay. Will you commit to releasing it?
Senator, we'll take that back and we will work with you in this committee.
How about just a yes or no? Will you commit to releasing this unclassified document that alleges that the President of the United States, has taken $5 million or more in bribes from a foreign nation?
The document has already been released pursuant to a subpoena to the House Oversight Committee.
Has it been released to this committee?
We will work with this committee within the parameters that are established to meet
Will you release the
request.
document to the public? It's unclassified. Don't you think the American people have a right to see it?
Senator, the document, as you know, contains sensitive information that has bearing on the life of the source of the information, potentially.
You can redact the source's name. We do this all the time.
In some instances, Senator, and I know you know this, that is not sufficient to protect people. And that's what we strive and work to do each and every day. And I hope you would take that seriously, too.
Oh, I take it very seriously. But I also take seriously the fact that your institution has repeatedly abused its authority, has repeatedly targeted political opponents. Your institution is the one that went to the door of pro-life protesters with SWAT teams to try and intimidate people because of their speech. Your institution is the one that treated parents as domestic terrorists because of their speech. Your institution is the one that, according to the court, the FISA court, ran 278,000 unwarranted, probably illegal queries on Americans, right? That was your institution, correct?
With respect to the compliance incidents, yes, some of the other things you cited, we can take them one by one. They are not.
Compliance, you would characterize the unlawful querying 278,000 times of American citizens as compliance issues?
We've said before, I've said that it's totally unacceptable.
Who's been fired for it?
Individuals involved are handled through the disciplinary process.
Who's been fired for it?
We have, in the case of the unintentional instance where something similar happened, we have fired people in the past.
Wait, I'm sorry. What does that word salad mean? The unintentional instance where what does that mean? Who's been fired for the 278,000 times that you improperly or illegally queried the database for American citizens? Anybody?
When we find intentional incidents.
Well, you're saying that the 278,000 queries were unintentional?
I believe that's correct.
Wow, 278,000 times American citizens' information was queried by your agency unintentionally? That's your testimony?
I would want to go back and check that, Senator. But
well, that's what you just told me.
My understanding is that the vast majority of
Well, wait, that's different. You just said it was. You just said it was unintentional. Now it's the vast majority. Which is it? Do you know?
I would want to go back and check it.
So you don't know?
My understanding is that likely all are were unintentional.
Likely all. So first it was all of them, then it was vast majority. Now it's likely all. So you don't know is the answer to the question.
I don't know the answer as we sit here today, but I will
Could have
find out
started
and I
with
will
that
get back to
probably.
you.
Who was fired for the lies to the FISA court for the Carter Page warrant? Who was fired for that? Anybody? Has anybody been held accountable for your institution deliberately lying to a FISA court to get a wiretap on an ongoing presidential campaign?
There is an ongoing disciplinary process with respect to individuals involved in that.
Here's the deal. You're back in front of us asking for the reauthorization of extraordinary authorities. Multiple courts have uncovered extraordinary abuses perpetrated by your agency. You are at the same time concealing information about serious allegations made against the President of the United States, even as your institution also targets his chief political opponent in an unprecedented way. Why would we ever give you the blank check that you want to continue surveilling American citizens in an improper manner? Why would we ever do that?
Senator, we're here to talk about reforms today. I did get confirmation that the query...
No, we're not. We're here to talk about the reauthorization of Section 702. Why would we reauthorize it, given your track record of abuse and illegal improper surveillance and political targeting? Why would we do that? Why would it be appropriate for this body to do that?
We've made significant reforms and implemented corrective measures. We've seen significant progress as a result of that, Senator. The queries that you mentioned early were, in fact, unintentional. That's what I was just told by my counterpart.
That is an amazing...
The earlier question.
So your testimony is the 280,000 queries of American citizens was unintentional. That's your final answer?
That's how they were assessed by that team that did the review. I'm not satisfied with that. That's why we've implemented further measures, as I announced earlier today.
Yeah, I don't believe that at all. And frankly, we've heard from your agency 1,000 times that you're going to do better, will do better. You promised after the abuses of Title I you'd do better, and then we find out that in the meantime you're illegally querying 280,000 American citizens' data. It's unbelievable, frankly. Everything you say is unbelievable.
Senator Tillis?
Thank you. And I just want to address Mr. Johnson, who said you brought the receipts. Well, Mr. Johnson, I've got some receipts for you. This committee met about 2 months ago, and the chairman, who can call any person in the world who walks this earth as a witness, called this guy, who tweeted just a couple weeks before the hearing, "Fuck cops." Your witness tweeted that. Not one of you disavowed that guy. Not one of you said that was inappropriate. I was stunned that you call yourself a pro-police party and you bring a witness before us that says, "Fuck cops." I don't believe in that, but I thought if you didn't believe in that, you would have taken the opportunity to say it. But no, not only did you not disavow it, you invited the guy here in Congress to be your witness. Imagine if we had ever done that. We didn't. You did. Second, I would love Mr. Johnson to disavow, because by the way, I will disavow the defund the police movement. I've never called for it. I believe, just as President Biden believes when he addressed Congress, that we should fund the police. But Mr. Johnson, will you disavow your colleague, Marjorie Taylor Greene, who tweets out and makes money off of a defund the FBI movement? Because they're police too. They protect us too. But I don't think you will. I think you're going to sit silent, and your silence, by the way, is complicity. I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. The gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Yield to the gentleman from Arizona.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. Appreciate the backpedaling at an alarming rate from the other side. Watch out, you might fall over backwards. We have a video to play. I think this will provide some visual summation. Please.
And the police has to happen. We need to defund the police.
Mayor Eric Garcetti saying, take some of the money from policing, about $150 million.
I applaud Eric Garcetti for doing what he's done.
But we need to completely dismantle the Minneapolis Police Department.
It is outdated, it is wrong-headed thinking to think that the only way you're going to get communities to be safe is to put more police officers on the street.
So yes, defund your butts. Defund you.
Yes, I support the reallocation of resources
from NYPD.
We will be moving funding from the NYPD.
Yes, I support the defund movement. I'm for responsible reallocation of resources.
And defund the police.
I think you do all those other things, you don't need all the money that's going to the police department. So yeah, I mean, the spirit of it, I do support that.
Yeah, and a lot of us were asked if we could imagine a future without police back in 2017 when we were running for office. And I answered yes to that question.
We are going to reduce funding in the police department and redirect that money.
We propose to redirect over $7 million from the police bureau.
The police department here in Minneapolis needs to be dismantled, and we need to start anew.
In some necessary cases, completely dismantling those police forces.
Police departments are taking a sizable amount of the budget of a lot of municipalities and other entities. We need to look at those budgets, pull some of the money back. When we talk about defunding the police, defunding the Pentagon.
My push is that we defund our police departments.
Defunding police means defunding police. If these reports are accurate, then these proposed cuts to the NYPD budget are a disingenuous illusion. This is not a victory. The freshman Democrat adding, the fight to defund policing will continue.
Mr. Chairman, I also have several articles that I would like to submit for the record. Instead of reading all the titles, I'll just provide those to you, if that's okay.
Without objection.
And I'll yield back to the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Klein.
Would the gentleman yield?
Yield to the chair.
Yeah, I would just say, in response to the gentleman from California, of course we disavow that tweet. That is obvious, and if we'd have known that individual had that tweet out there, I doubt if he'd have been invited as a witness. With that, I yield back to the gentleman from Virginia. Gentleman yields back.
Mr. Shogun, when you were here last year, a number of senators asked you, including me, a series of questions about article you'd written, public statements you had made on social media that were, I have to say, pretty grossly partisan, and I thought offensive, and you and I went back and forth about it. After that, a number of us asked you questions for the record relating to these statements. I want to follow up on one of them. I, in particular, asked you to give us a full accounting of the public posts that you had made on Twitter. You had locked your Twitter account before you came before this committee. It had previously been public. I asked you to provide the public posts that had previously been available on Twitter because the ones that we have were pretty disturbing. You responded as follows, and I quote, "My personal Twitter account is comprised of posts about my mystery novels, events at the White House Historical Association, Pittsburgh sports teams, travels, and my dog," end quote. Is this an accurate statement?
Yes, Senator.
I just remind you, you're under oath. Is this an accurate statement?
Yes, Senator.
Well, let's talk a little bit about your Twitter posts then that I was asking you about. On February 18th, 2022, you posted on Twitter bemoaning the dropping of mask requirements for children, including those under the age of 5. Do you remember that post?
No, Senator. Those tweets were in my personal capacity.
No. I asked you, would you give all public posts that you had made on Twitter? You said no, effectively, and you said that your Twitter posts consisted of mystery novels, events at the White House Historical Association, Pittsburgh sports teams, travels, and my dog. And you just told me now under oath that you stood by that. So now let's talk about your Twitter posts. On February 18th, 2022, you posted bemoaning the fact that mask requirements for children under the age of 5, one of whom I happen to have, by the way, had been dropped. Is that a post about your dog or sports teams?
My social media is in my personal capacity,
Answer
Senator.
my question, please, because you've testified under oath that you only posted about your dog and sports teams and novels, and you also said you wouldn't give this committee any of your public posts. So, is your post on February 18th, 2022, bemoaning the lifting of mask requirements for children under the age of 5, who I might just ask, all of the data has said is extremely harmful to children, these mask requirements? We'll leave that aside for now. Is that a post about your dog or sports teams? Yes or no?
My social media is in my personal capacity, Senator.
Yes or no, Ms. Shogun? You are under oath before this committee, and I have to say, you have placed this issue squarely in record by repeatedly refusing to answer. Yes or no?
My social media is in my personal capacity, Senator.
So you're not answering my question. Let's talk about another post. 26th of May, 2022, You talk about an assault weapons ban, retweet a post, ban assault weapons now. Say you agree with this idea that you have to be a certain age to buy so-called assault weapons in America. Is that a post about sports teams or your dog or mystery novels?
My social media is in my personal capacity, Senator.
What about the post on January 5th of 2021 in which you say that Ted Cruz ought to stay in his own lane and not worry about what's going on in Pittsburgh? This is a reference, I think, to questions he had about the certification of the last election. Is that a post about your dog or sports teams or mystery novels?
My social media is in my personal capacity, Senator.
What about the post, you remember December 10th, 2020, where you said that you were hoping that President Trump would have his vetoes overridden, and you agreed with the post that he was a weak policy president? Is that a post about your dog or sports teams or mystery novels?
My social media is in my personal capacity.
What about your post on January 5th, 2021, in which you speculated that President Trump would pardon himself next, participating in a conversation about the certification of the Electoral College? Is that a post about sports teams or mystery novels or your work at the White House Historical Association?
My social media is in my personal capacity, Senator.
What about the post? Do you remember this one? I said we seem to be having an incredible case of amnesia, but maybe you remember this one. This is from December 3rd of 2021, in which you advise an individual who goes by Meg on social media that the Library of Congress, you advise this person to complain about religious flags that have been planted on the grounds of the Library of Congress, and you say that they ought to be removed. And you go on to give this person advice about how to complain and have them removed. Do you remember that post?
My social media is in my personal
Do you remember the
capacity.
post?
My social media is in my personal capacity, Senator.
I have to say, I have been here for 4 years in the Senate. I have never seen a witness stonewall like this before. Never. And I've seen a lot. This is extraordinary. Do you remember this post? December 3rd, 2021.
My social media is in my personal capacity, Senator.
I mean, this is unbelievable. And you want to be the archivist of the United States. You lied to us under oath. You lied to us in your QFRs. You just lied to me a second ago under oath. And now you're sitting here stonewalling, not answering questions about public posts that you've made. Are you a lawyer, Ms. Shogan?
No, Senator.
Are you familiar with the Shirtliff case at the United States Supreme Court?
No, Senator, I'm not.
Well, in that case, the Supreme Court held that, in fact, it constitutes viewpoint discrimination for a government entity to remove religious flags from its property when it's opened up the property to allow other people to put flags on it. Exactly the question that you were addressing in your public posts on Twitter. You're giving legal advice, which you're not qualified to give, directly contrary to the United States Supreme Court. I just wonder, does this have to do with your view that you wrote about that the religious right is connected to the rise of anti-intellectualism in American politics? Is that why you said what you said about religious flags, that the religious right is a force for anti-intellectualism? Explain that to me.
No, Senator.
Do you stand by your comment that the religious right is part of the rise of anti-intellectualism in American politics?
Senator, that article was written. It was about how Republican presidents use common sense terminology to effectively communicate with Americans.
Yeah, in which you said that the religious right, the rise of the religious right is part of the rise of anti-intellectualism in American politics. I just point out that's the article in which you say anti-intellectual, the title is Anti-Intellectualism in the Modern Presidency, Republican Populism. Very nonpartisan. Dr. Shogan, I'm going to ask you again, will you give to this committee your public posts on Twitter? Will you make them available to this committee?
My social media is in my personal capacity.
Mr. Chairman, I have to tell you, this is the most extraordinary thing I have seen in my brief time in the Senate. I have never seen a witness blatantly lie under oath like Dr. Shogan has just done to this committee, stonewalled this committee, and just repeatedly refused to answer my questions about her own posts that are in public. For these reasons, I will oppose your nomination, and I strongly, strongly urge this committee to take action on this and force this witness to own up to the fact that she is misleading us right now before our eyes, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman. Ms. Bradford, in your testimony, did I understand you right, said that you want to end all plastic manufacturing?
I said the plastics industry must be stopped.
So does that mean end plastic manufacturing?
I mean, in my dream world, sure, but I think that, go ahead.
No, so I don't mean to be condescending here. I just point out, what's going to replace your glasses? Like,
So
why
I
would you wear
do
your
know,
glasses around your face? They're made of plastic.
maybe.
No,
I don't know what they're made out of.
They are. What about, and I'm just pointing out some things here, because I just want to be realistic when we're having conversations, because when statements are made like this, I just want to open people's eyes and say, well, okay, that's easy to say, but what's the solution? Your water bottle in front of you.
This one?
Yes. That plastic?
No.
The lid is. That's plastic.
Right. So
Right.
I would say to your
cell phone-
question that I would first be concerned about single-use plastics, and then we can talk about alternatives to this.
Your cell phone there. Is it plastic?
The cases, but it's glass because I broke
Oh, the components
this
inside of it's
screen
not
yesterday.
plastic? The components made out of it's not plastic? Yeah, they are. The water that you filled that water bottle up with, where'd you fill that water bottle up out of?
A water filling station.
All right, and it was delivered by a drink station that was plastic?
I didn't check.
The edges are. The piping coming to it. Now, you have a couple choices with the piping. We could go back to using wood, but then you have to line it in chemical. Or we could go back and use lead, because we used to have water piping that was lead. That was harmful to us. We go back to galvanized, but galvanized rust and had discoloration. We go back to copper, but copper has to be mined, and everybody wants to stop mining in the U.S., so you use plastic to deliver piping that you fill that water bottle up with today. I point this out because the clothes you have on, I guarantee you have plastic in it. The shoes you have on your feet, the soles of those shoes are plastic. So we talk about any plastic manufacturing, and everybody in here cheers when you say that, but everybody here is depending on plastic as you set. So if you want to end it, then quit using it. It's kind of like, I don't shop at certain places right now because I don't agree with some of their policies. I choose not to do that. You can choose to not use plastic. Do your work. If you believe it, then live it that way. And if not, then tell me what the solution is. Mr. Sunday, can you manufacture a car today without plastic? Because we talked about manufacturing, the chairman brought up manufacturing cars as it is safe, but the components that go into the cars today, can you do that without plastic?
No, Senator, and increasingly so with the new mileage mandates. You increasingly need to use automotive components that are plastics derived.
So we wouldn't have manufacturing, today's modern manufacturing, if we didn't have plastics, correct?
Correct.
Ms. Jackson, do you agree with that statement?
Yes.
So what's the alternative for manufacturing? Because the Democrats talk about middle-class wages. Middle-class wages typically come directly from manufacturing. What is it that we're manufacturing that doesn't have plastic in it today?
Nothing, and you know what? It would increase the cost of everything if we turn to an alternative, and it would disproportionately impact low-income people who have lower incomes. It would be another regressive tax on the poor.
So according to your testimony, Ms. Jackson, it sounds like you're saying that the environmental justice agenda does more harm than good for low-income families. Is that correct?
Yes, and you know, I have the unique opportunity to see both sides when the industry comes in the area and when it doesn't. As an auditor, I worked on Nissan North America. Nissan North America moved to Smyrna, Tennessee, where it built the largest automotive manufacturing plants. And the transformation was astonishing. I mean, it went from a community that was poor to a community that U.S. World News voted one of the top 10 places to retire. You had poor people in areas that were poor that became middle class. You had middle class people that became upper middle class, and a lot of upper middle class people that became affluent. They have attractions, They have amenities, they have housing, affordability. I mean, the amount of prosperity in that area has resonated out 3 counties. 3 counties. I've also had the opportunity to see when an industrial, and that wouldn't happen if you don't have an industrial complex moving into the area where you're talking about high economics. I've also seen the other side where all of a sudden you have deteriorating buildings, empty storefronts, dilapidated housing, people standing on street corner housing, that families that are broken. So we need to balance the fact that people's lives need economic upward mobility. And we can't just say, we're going to take out an industry and leave people poorer than they were. Poverty causes the worst health care in this country. Poverty is the one that destroys lives. It destroys health. It creates trauma. So we need to make sure that when we're talking about these issues, we take into account the human loss of life, not just the environmental impacts.
Thank you. Thanks for indulgence there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Title IX was a landmark civil rights law. It helped create the incredible breadth of women's sports and girls' sports that we see across the country. I believe in girls' sports. I believe in women's sports. I'm the proud father of 2 daughters who are both athletes. I think participating in competitive sports is a wonderful thing for a young girl. I think it is a wonderful thing for a woman. And I think, unfortunately, today's Democrat Party has decided that women's sports and girls' sports no longer matters, and they're willing to push radical legislation designed to destroy girls' sports and women's sports. Ms. Gaines, I want to thank you for your courage. You are relatively young, but you have demonstrated incredible courage. And because you have dared to speak up, you have been demonized, you have been vilified. I saw when you were attacked by a leftist mob at San Francisco State University for daring to speak up. You had an incredible record as a swimmer at the University of Kentucky. You were a 2-time NCAA All-American. You were a 5-time SEC champion. You're an SEC record holder and a 2-time Olympic trial qualifier. But yet on March 27th, 2022, something changed. What happened on March 17th, 2022?
That's when Thomas and I raced in the 200 freestyle and again resulted in a tie.
And so you tied. What was the consequence of tying?
We went behind the awards podium where typically you're handed your trophy, you're marched out, you're named an All-American. And so we go back there and the official looks at both Thomas and myself and says, "Great job, but you guys tied. And we only have 1 trophy, therefore we're giving this trophy to Leah." And I question this and I say, why? And at first, I shortened it in my testimony, but really he stumbled on his words. He didn't know how to answer this. And at first he's, well, we're just doing this in chronological order. To which I further pressed and I said, okay, well, what are you being chronological about? Because we tied. And if we're doing this off alphabetical order, G comes before T. So what are you being chronological about? To which this wasn't a script they had prepared for him. And he actually appreciated his honesty. He did say, we have to give the trophy for Leah because Leah has to have it for pictures. They've made that clear. Leah has to have the trophy for pictures. You can pose with this trophy, but you have to give yours back. You have to go home empty-handed. Leah Thomas takes the trophy home. End of story.
Now, let me ask you, as someone who's competed at the elite level, in your experience, is there a difference between women and men?
Of course. I think we learned this at a very young age, watching even 12 and unders play. Going through puberty causes irreversible advantage, that no matter the training, no matter the diet, no matter any alterable change you can make, will overcome that male advantage. Especially in sports like swimming, where lung capacity matters so much. Even something as silly as throat size, men have on average a 40% larger throat, which sounds like it's nothing. But when you're grasping for air, that 40% larger throat makes a huge difference in athletic success, not to mention height. You guys know the differences.
Ms. Robinson, do you agree with Ms. Gaines that there's a difference between women and men?
If the question is about trans women,
I'm just asking, is there a difference between women and men?
what I can say here is that the NCAA has rules in place. They've had rules in place for the last decade, and when this competition happened,
I'm going to try again.
The rules were clear.
Do you believe there's a difference between women and men? It's a yes/no question. Do you believe there's a difference?
Oh, I think that we're talking about this case with the NCAA.
No, I'm asking a question. Do you believe there's a difference between women and men? Most people could answer this very simply. I'm curious if you're willing to do so.
Oh, absolutely. I'm just putting it into the context of the conversation that we're having. I think that there are definitions related to sex.
Is
but
that
I
a
also
yes?
think
So I'm
that
trying to get a yes or no. I'm not trying to get a speech. Is there a difference between women and men?
I think that there are definitions for biological sex.
Okay, so you're
which
not
is
answering
different
that.
than
Let me ask
gender.
you this question then. Why do women's sports exist? If you can't define a difference between women and men, why not abolish women's sports and just tell little girls to swim with little boys and see who wins?
Oh, I'm simply saying that that sex is
My
different
question,
than gender.
why
and I do believe that women's sports have a great
exist?
value. I mean, Senator, I'll tell you right
Ms.
now.
Robinson, please answer the question I'm asking you.
Absolutely.
Why do women's sports exist?
I think that there are so many positive benefits to sports.
But
I mean,
why have a
we've talked
separate
about it here
category for
today.
women? If there's no difference between women and men, why to have women's sports?
I'm saying that there's a difference between sex and gender, and that the NCAA has rules in place, which they have for the last decade.
Mr. Chairman,
which
I would
determine
like
that
to enter into
related
the
to
record an
participation.
article from Duke Law called Comparing Athletic Performances for the Best Elite Women to Boys and Men. And it goes through examining in 2017 the top records for women in the world in various track and field events. So, for example, in the 100 meter, the top record for women in the world was 10.71 seconds. Now, that record for the number one woman in the world in 2017 was, in the year 2017, broken by 124 boys under 18. In that same year, the record for the number one competing woman in the 100-meter dash in the world was broken by a total of 2,474 men. If the radical Democrat agenda to destroy girls' sports and women's sports succeeds, little girls will not have a chance to compete. So I ask unanimous consent that this article be entered into the record.
Without objection. Senator Padilla.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Colleagues, a recent
We got a whole crew. Good afternoon, and thank you all for joining us. It's great to stand up here with some of the most influential and amazing women from across our state. We are all here to say, frankly, that we've had enough trying to erase women and girls, enough denying our biological differences from men, and enough of the craziness that is taking over our country. I've had the honor of being both the first woman and the first mother to serve as the governor of Arkansas. Before that, I was the first mother and only the third woman to serve as the White House press secretary. Because of that, I came into this role with a few pretty unique experiences. Among them is giving birth to 3 amazing kids. That experience underscored to me that a woman's perspective is important and fundamentally different from a man's. Nowadays, though, only conservatives seem to be making that point. On the left, women have taken a back seat to political correctness. It's why Senator Irving and Representative Barker had to pass the Fairness in Women's Sports Act to defend our girls across the state. They're using nonsense words to erase women and girls, and more importantly, to erase our voices and our experiences. Today, we're taking a stand against woke nonsense. What frankly started as a fad among a few grad students has seeped down into corporations, the healthcare industry, and increasingly state government. It's demeaning to women, and it needs to stop. In a moment, I'll sign an executive order banning a number of all sorts of ridiculous words from state government documents. Those include words like pregnant people, laboring person, birth giver, and several other nonsense terms that have cropped up in recent years. Some on the left will accuse us of being nitpicky, that Arkansas should just lay down and accept the cultural revolution without complaint. I say it's the exact opposite. It's the left that decided that woman is a dirty word. It's the left that decided we needed to toss out basic biology and basic grammar along with it. I think they're just mad that conservatives are starting to fight back. And they better get ready, because we're just getting started. Thank you for being here, and thank you to the amazing women that are standing up here with me. I'll sign this executive order. We'll hear a few words from Dr. Chandler, and I'll be happy to take a few questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Kay Chandler. I'm pleased to be Arkansas Surgeon General, and I'm a practicing obstetrician gynecologist here in Little Rock. I've been serving women of all ages since 1997, but the governor's executive order doesn't require a medical degree to understand. It's just common sense. As I was taught in medical school, and actually have known since I was 5 years old, when I happened to be looking through my mother's nursing school textbooks and ran into some embryology textbooks, women give birth. Today, that has somehow become controversial, but it shouldn't be. Governor Sanders' executive order is smart on a number of counts. It stands up to those who try to erase women in the name of political correctness. In this administration, I know our governor won't let political correctness get in the way of science. Thank you.
If there are any questions, I'll be happy to take a couple.
Are there examples that there have been in state documents of any terms like pregnant people being used? And is there, why now? What's the particular urgency for doing this?
Well, there's always an urgency to doing the right thing. Look, I wish that we didn't have to write and have executive orders like this, but because of the growing trend that continues to seep into all areas of our life, we feel like it's important. We have seen specific instances that have happened in state government and been reported in other places in state government. And so at no time will I apologize for defending women and standing up for the differences between men and women. Does it matter if there's one? Is that not enough? How many times should a woman have to be insulted before we stand up and say, we've had it? Like, it shouldn't even take one time. But one instance to me is enough for us to stand up for women and say that we can do better, and we will. I mean, I'm not keeping a running tally, but I have seen one specific instance, and we've had a number of other instances that have been reported to our office. Specifically at the health department. As I just said, we've seen specific instances at the health department and several others that have been reported.
So you say you're taking a stand against political correctness, but you're about to sign an executive order that bans terms that can be offensive. So I'm just wondering.
It's not that they're offensive, it's that they are scientifically wrong. And that's a different thing. There's something different about whether your feelings got hurt versus something that is just factually incorrect.
You said they were insulting to women.
I think it is insulting to women to define them as something other than what they are, and to take away experiences that are so specific to them that cannot be created just by saying them into existence.
So how is your executive order not enforcing political correctness as you see it? Because you're trying to ban terms that you see as not scientifically accurate, but also insulting.
Because there's a difference between what is right and what is wrong, what is factual and what is not. It's not just political correctness. It's literally the difference of what is accurate and what isn't.
What about the federal government uses the term pregnant people
which actually I think underscores the exact point. Because we have a federal government that is taking those kind of actions, it is imperative for states to step up and actually defend women. It's, I feel like there's a question of why now, because we have examples where the craziness is seeping into our state and our communities.
I guess the practicality of this, like, our agencies going to have to scrub any links to any federal forms or any federal sites that use that term.
This would be specific to state government documents that we have the ability to monitor through an executive order.
Are there any ways for like an opt-out provision or anything like that if state documents would need to have that for any federal purposes?
I can't imagine why anybody would need to have incorrect information in a specific government form, but we could cross that bridge when we get there if needed. All right, thank you so much. I'm going to sign the executive order now.
And can do its job. Senator Kennedy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. General, welcome. Help me. I tried to listen carefully to my colleagues, but I'm still a little bit confused. You've been IG since 2011, and you do a lot of internal investigations. In other words, did some particular employee at the Fed not do their job? Is that correct?
Yes.
About how many of those you think you've done?
Well, in terms of investigations of potential misconduct or wrongdoing, we have typically had a running average of about 60 or 70 of those. Obviously, the pandemic...
Is that total? 60 or 70 a year?
No, at any point in time.
Okay.
Many of them are closed. New ones come in through our hotline, which we open up. But that's typically a rough gauge for how many investigations we have pending.
Since you've been there in 2011, again, I'm talking internal investigations, would 500 sound right?
I'd have to look into it. I don't want to give you a number.
No, I'm not going to hold you to it. Wasn't many. Is it more? You think it's more than 500?
I would like to look into it and get you an exact number.
Okay. In what percentage of the cases, just ballpark, do you find wrongdoing?
Again, it would be a wild guess, and I'm not comfortable giving one to you, but we can certainly look into that and develop those numbers for you.
Frankly, I would have thought you'd had it. Would have that before you came today. We think it's more than half?
No, I would not think so.
More than a quarter?
That's where I'm uncomfortable.
Well, is it happen frequently that you find wrongdoing or infrequently?
It's not infrequent.
It's not infrequent? Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. And when you find wrongdoing, are the people who committed the wrongdoing, according to your report, fired?
Sometimes.
Okay. What percentage are fired?
Again, sir, I would like to get you a specific number if that's what you'd like.
Yeah, I think if you could get us that number, and perhaps we could do this again. Because I think people have the right to know that. I don't want to pick on the Federal Reserve. I just want to treat them like everybody else. And my sense is, and I think your numbers can prove or disprove this, but my sense is that it is easier to divorce your spouse than get fired. at the Federal Reserve. And if that's the case, we're entitled to know that. It's a lot of money over there. And that's not a criticism of anybody. And tell me again about your salary. It's the average of what?
It's the average of both the salary and the bonus that is attributed to the other individuals who are similarly situated in terms of the organizational structure, which for me is the division director level. So there are 12 other individuals, and it's the average of their salary plus bonus.
Okay. So there are about 13 of you, and your salary is set on the average of the 13.
That is the case for all DFEIGs. That's in the IG Act as the formula to be used.
I'm just asking, are the others set that way too?
The other
The 12 other ones whose salaries are used to get your salary?
I'm not aware of how those are are established.
Okay. And do you get a bonus?
No, I do not.
Okay. Do the others get a bonus?
Yes, that's part of that average that I mentioned.
Okay. Do all 12 of the others get a bonus?
I don't know the answer to that.
Do they get a bonus when they say inflation is transitory and it's not? Do they still get their bonus?
I don't have the answer to that.
Okay. How do we get that information?
Requested from the Federal Reserve folks.
How about we call the IG? Can you get it for us?
IG should not be in the position of getting information to turn over if we're not otherwise engaged in an audit or evaluation or investigation.
I know you're in the, if I could have 30 more seconds. I know you're in the process of looking at the bank failures, and I don't want you to, I'm not trying to put you on the spot because you don't know yet, but you know, I found two things ironic. Maybe irony is the wrong word to use, but as a result of well, strike that. It seems that ever since the Great Recession, we've been very concerned, as we should be, about banks that are too big to fail. Big is dangerous. I'm not against big. I'm against dumb. So, but if you have an institution that is really, really big and it does something dumb, it hurts a lot of people. Nobody ever goes to jail, but that's a separate story. But it looks to me like, as a result of these recent failures, that our big banks are getting bigger. And I find that ironic. Again, maybe the wrong word. I don't know if you're going to look at that in your studies.
Well, Senator, that strikes me as being a straight-ahead policy issue. Or the Federal Reserve Board decides what rules of engagement for the supervision of banks at different sizes, tailoring. All of those are supervisory, policy-based decisions, and the IGs are prohibited from getting involved in overseeing policy.
Senator Warren and I may disagree with this, but we disagree a lot, but we still like each other. But see, if I ask Mr. Barr that question, I think the answer I'm going to get is, look, the problem with the bank failures is the management did dumb things, and they were incompetent. And yeah, some of my regulators were not as proactive as they should have been, but it's Trump's fault. Trump ain't my homework. And I don't think that's a candid assessment of the situation. The other thing that I find curious, and I'm going to ask Mr. Barr about this. Traditionally, when banks get in trouble, you don't go out and shout it. You know, we're in trouble. They call their regulators, say, we got a problem here. Or the regulators spot it and they go in. And to prevent a bank run or panic, they handle it quietly. And the regulators will call around with other banks that are healthier and say, can we affect a marriage here? And that doesn't seem to be what's happening. And as a result, the healthy banks that would normally come in and help for a price, a fair price, and help the failed bank. The healthy banks, they're pretty smart. They're waiting. They're going, no, we don't want to come in too early. Let's let them go under. And then we'll come in and we'll get a great deal, and the taxpayers will have to guarantee all our potential losses. Can you look into that? Because if I ask Mr. Barr, God bless him, he's just going to say, it's the fault of the bank presidents and Trump ate my homework. So I'm looking for somebody who can help us answer those.
To the extent that you're asking, Senator, about the process of once a bank fails, what does the Fed, what does the FDIC do in terms of trying to get another bank to come in and take over or buy its operations? That would be kind of post-failure, so that wouldn't be part of our current review, material loss reviews, but we can consider looking into the kind of post-failure issues like that, or discussions that may have been had with the other financial regulators?
I'm taking too long, but here's what I'm getting to. And this is not a criticism of J.P. Morgan or Mr. Diamond. I have great respect for both of them. But you know the deal they made is a good deal. I'm not suggesting that they shouldn't have made a good deal for their shareholders. But the truth is, the deal was so good, if we still had white pages, you could open up the white pages, put your hand over your eyes, and pick a name and say, we're giving you this deal. And it would be successful. Because the taxpayers had to guarantee 80% of the losses. And somebody needs to look at that.
Senator, I'd be happy to come up and talk to you further about that, have my team come up and discuss it with you and your staff and see if there's a way.
But I want to talk about it in front of the American people.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, we can start by having a conversation in your office if you'd like. It's up to you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Senator Kennedy. Senator Kennedy, I want to follow up on something you...
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Administrator, the two cartels that are sending fentanyl into the United States are located in Mexico, aren't they?
Yes, sir.
And isn't it a fact that we could stop those cartels in their tracks if President Lopez Obrador would invite American military and or law enforcement personnel to come into Mexico and work with his military and law enforcement personnel?
Senator, what I would say from my purview as the head of the DEA...
But is my statement true or not?
What I would say is that we're focused on the two cartels, who we believe are doing exactly what you say. They are responsible for the fentanyl coming
Let me
into
ask
the
you
United
again.
States.
If President Lopez Obrador invited the American military and or American law enforcement officials to come into Mexico to work with the same in Mexico, we could stop the cartels, could we not?
Senator, I believe this is a whole of government effort and has to be, including whether it's the military, us, FBI,
Now,
and others.
Madam Administrator, I've listened to you here for almost an hour telling us how bad fentanyl is. Thank you for that, but we know.
Yes, sir.
I'm going to ask you a third time. If President Lopez Obrador invited the American military and or law enforcement personnel to come into Mexico and work with the same in Mexico, we could stop the cartels. Isn't that a fact?
So, Senator, I can speak to the law enforcement side of this, and you just mentioned law enforcement. I believe that this is vital for both Mexico and the United States. Mexicans are dying as well, as we showed in the Chapitos.
Well, then why don't we stop them?
So
would it help? Let me ask you a fourth time. Would it help if President Lopez Obrador, I don't think it's a complicated question, Madam Administrator. You're asking us for more money every year, more money, and it gets worse, worse, and worse. You know, in the real world, the nitty-gritty of the real world, when you fail, you get fired. In government, when you fail, you get more money because obviously you need it. Now, let me ask you a fourth time. If President Lopez Obrador, and I'd appreciate an answer, if President Lopez Obrador invited the American military and our law enforcement personnel to come into Mexico and work with his, we could stop the cartels, couldn't we?
I believe, Senator, that we can stop the cartels.
Okay, have you made that suggestion to President Biden?
If I could, I believe that we can stop the cartels by...
Have you made that suggestion to President Biden?
Senator, I have been very vocal in the whole of government setting on the importance of fentanyl and all of us using every single effort and authority that we have.
Why hasn't President Biden done it? I mean, this is the way the American people, whose sons and daughters are dying, look at it. Our economy is $23 trillion. Mexico's economy is $1.3 trillion. Ours is 18 times bigger. We buy $400 billion every year from Mexico. Without the people of America, Mexico, figuratively speaking, would be eating cat food out of a can and living in a tent behind an outback. So why don't you and the president, embarrassing no one, get on the phone and call President Lopez Obrador and make him a deal he can't refuse to allow our military and our law enforcement officials to go into Mexico and work with his to stop the cartels? Why don't you do that?
Senator, what I am doing every single day is working with the incredible men and women of DEA who are risking their lives across 334 offices worldwide.
And I appreciate that, but you're not doing what would work. Why won't you do what will work?
Senator, we are...
Why don't you call the president this afternoon and say, Mr. President, let's call President Lopez Obrador privately and make him a deal he can't refuse. Because we both know that President Lopez Obrador has neither the ability nor the will to stop the cartels. But yet we go along and pretend that they're our friends, and Mexico is our friend. But he has criminal organizations that are killing our people, and you know how to stop it, and the president does. And you're not doing it.
Senator, we are working every day to stop it.
But you're not doing what would stop it.
We are transforming, and we are working in countless ways across the globe to do what needs to be done for the American people. And there is nothing that the men and
when
women...
it's important to you, you make it happen. When it's not important to you, you make an excuse.